Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Reap the Spoils of 2023. I'm Mark Sullivan.
I'm Delilah Lugo.
I'm Jason Kwasnicki.
Happy New Year, guys! We
Happy
did
Yes,
it.
very happy New Year.
We're here, and we're gonna celebrate this momentous occasion by talking about a video game that came out last month. And Jason, what video game might that be?
We're talking about dreams and honor tonight. We're talking about Crisis Core,
We're talking
the
about Gaga.
PSP masterpiece.
Yeah, we're talking about Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. Reap the Spoils is a monthly spoiler cast where we pick a game, we play it, and then we spoil the hell out of it. If you have not played the game that we're talking about, I highly suggest you pause the episode, go play that game, and then come back and listen to the episode. Otherwise, we're going to spoil the whole damn thing for you, and nobody wants that. Ideally, you want to experience these things for yourself before you listen to three schmucks just completely ruin it for you. And with this one, it comes with a little extra homework. It comes with a little extra caveat. While I feel it's unlikely you would have played Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII without having played the original Final Fantasy VII, it's kind of important that you do.
And many of you maybe have only played the remake and then played this,
No,
which was a mistake.
Go play the original. I mean,
Yeah.
if you played Remake and you haven't listened to our episode on Remake, go listen to our episode on Remake. But I do pretty clearly lay out in that episode as well. If you haven't played the original, it's kind of a good idea that you do play the original before you jump into Remake, before you jump into this. That original game is so core to the storytelling and the things that these surrounding games have to say. So if you have not played the original Final Fantasy VII, we're gonna spoil the biggest twist of that game in this episode because that's kind of what this game is about. At the end of the day, like, it's a pretty important plot point. So yeah, we're gonna spoil Final Fantasy VII and Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. We'll also talk a little bit about Remake, probably closer to the end of the episode. I will telegraph that very well, so in case you have not played Remake, you'll know you'll know the timestamp to skip to, so we don't ruin that for you unceremoniously. The other thing I'll say before we get started is, if you're a longtime Reap the Spoilers listener, thank you so much. I would really appreciate it if you make sure to share the show, rate and review the show, like and subscribe, and do all the things that the YouTubers usually tell you to do. Just if you love us, show us some love. That's all I'm asking. And if you're a new listener, thank you so much for choosing us, and I hope you enjoy.
Not too much love. Be fair. Be confident to criticize where you feel it's warranted.
Oh
Don't
yeah,
kiss
yeah,
ass.
yeah. If you have anything bad to say about us too, if you have any criticism, please let us know. I take that very well as well, and we welcome it. We need it. It's how we're gonna grow as podcasters, and how we're gonna grow the audience that listens to us. So please, by all means, share the
Indeed.
love. All right, are we ready to talk about Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII?
Yes.
Starting with the history lesson. Jason, you ready?
I know the history. It's a sad history.
It's not that sad a history. You're such a Debbie Downer, Jason. Come on.
Well,
man.
I mean, I'll let you tell the history, but in the notes here, a crucial component of that history is left out.
Well, look, I think I know what you're getting at, and we'll get to that. So, all right, let's start off. Brief history lesson of Crisis Core. Here we go. Final Fantasy VII, the original game, released on the Sony PlayStation, the very first PlayStation, the first one ever. It released in 1997. In January in Japan, and I think in September in North America, and I think Europe, like, I don't know, a couple months later, I think in November or something. And 7 was massively successful all over the place. It was, I mean, I shouldn't have to tell you the significance of that game's release. Commercially and critically successful, won tons of accolades and awards, and it's what popularized Japanese RPGs in the West. I'm sure it's a story everyone's heard a million times before. Over time, and I believe this decision was made. It was just prior to Squaresoft merging with Enix. but after the release of Final Fantasy X-2, and it was actually because of X-2's success as a direct sequel to Final Fantasy X, they decided, hey, this might be a good way to make money, and what better way to make money off of building off of an existing game than creating a whole compilation centered around a most popular one, Final Fantasy VII, which was headed by Yoshinori Kitase and Tetsuya Nomura, of significant fame and much annoyance to Jason.
I don't have much problem with Katase. I think as a creative, he's fine. I think he lost his touch over the years. It's mostly Nomura.
Well, anyway, so the first planned thing in this compilation was actually Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, but it wasn't the first to come out. The first to come out, or at least to begin to come out, was Before Crisis, which was a mobile game on Japanese flip phones, exclusive to Japan, has never been released elsewhere outside of like fan translations, and it never properly got emulated. So it's kind of one of those games that's totally lost to time, and it was released episodically for Japanese flip phones, starring and pretty much centered around the Turks of Shinra. That game, if I remember correctly, was led and directed by Hajime Tabata, who thus became the director of Crisis Core. And his original plan for this game was to port Before Crisis to PSP. That didn't happen when they decided that the star of this PSP game was going to be Zack. They transitioned over to a plan for Crisis Core, a prequel game that focused on Zack, just before the events of Final Fantasy VII. Jason, is there anything you want to add before I just close us out with the usual?
Just to give context to a lot of confused people who are probably don't understand what you and I were talking about previously. The decision, quote unquote, to expand the world and characters. This was an argument that had gone on in the board of Square for a long time between then COO, I'm sorry, Yuichi Wada, and then Vice President and creator of the series, Hinorobu Sakaguchi. Sakaguchi did not believe in sequels. He was philosophically against it. And Uichi Wada, who is essentially or was essentially a money man, said, "We have all these assets. Why are we wasting money creating new assets? Why don't we reuse assets? We already know it's popular. We can bank on it." Now, for a long time, because he was at that point the golden goose, Sakaguchi held sway over the board and was able to prevent this. That was until he made the fatal, dumb decision to try and make a movie that flopped and lost the company a lot of money.
And to be clear, that movie wasn't Advent Children. It was a
No, it
totally
was
different movie
Final
called
Fantasy: The Spirits Within.
Yes, and it was very very different.
Hey, it had Steve Buscemi in it, all right?
It did have Steve Buscemi in it.
But
This is true.
But anyway, after that, Sakaguchi lost favor with the board. The board decided to go ahead. Well, obviously, at that point, they already knew that, and Sakaguchi could see the writing on the wall, so he quietly formed a new company and began the process of stepping down. And then 10 came out, and then after that, you get 10-2, you get average, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. But yeah, and just to close us out with this, I guess this, instead of a brief history lesson, this was a more full one. I guess chalk that up to Jason and I.
I just want to be upfront with that, because while I do have a lot of legitimate criticisms of this game that I think you guys are going to share, I do want to admit my personal bias because of how big of a fan I am of Sakaguchi and him as a game developer and the history behind all of this. So there is somewhat of a bias there. At the same time, this game deserves every criticism it's going to get in this podcast.
And we're definitely going to talk about that. But anyway, to close us out, Crisis Core released in Japan for the Sony PlayStation Portable on September 13th, 2007. It actually didn't come to North America until March 25th, 2008. This was back in the era where a lot of Japanese developers and publishers were not doing a simultaneous worldwide release. So this game actually came out 6 months later to the West in March 2008. If you see this episode and you see, I always put the year of the release of the games in the title of the episodes. Um, you're gonna see 2008. I am basing that off the North American release date. That's where I've lived most of my life. So I know it came out in 2007 in Japan. It was actually a release for the 10th anniversary of Final Fantasy VII. So, yeah, I know. So don't get on my case about it. And then Reunion, the version that all three of us have played. I think it's the only version either of you have played. Unless Delilah, you played it on PSP before. I'm
No,
not
I
actually sure.
never played the game. I only saw the ending.
Okay. Yeah, well, you were kind of forced to in a way. But we'll talk about that much later. Reunion, Final Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, a remaster slash, like, I don't know. They keep calling it like a remaster sort of remake kind of thing. I forget what their nomenclature that they keep
A
touting is.
remake, a rebirth, a reunion, a refiddling. Oh, I don't want to say it.
But anyway, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, released on December 13th, 2022. It's a version we all just played for this episode. So yeah, and it's a version that it's out now. It's readily accessible. It's easy to get. Finally, Crisis Core is no longer locked to the PlayStation Portable. You can actually buy it and play it on modern consoles. Hallelujah. Finally, because this was one of those last titles that was like one of the last major PSP games that was just locked to that system. And I say major because it is one of the I will say it's one of the better PSP games. It's one of the more respected, well-beloved PSP games that was just kind of stuck on that platform. So finally, it's free. It's out of PSP jail. Um, yeah, that's the end of the history lesson. We're final warning. We're about to spoil Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. So if you have not, and by extension, Final Fantasy VII. So if you haven't played either of those games, please pause, go play those games, and then come back and listen to us spoil the crap out of it. And I will telegraph the remake spoilers later. So if you haven't played remake, don't worry. But you have played these games, don't worry. You can listen to this episode, and I will let you know when to pause, skip, and avoid the remake spoilers. Are we ready, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Let's
Okay.
go.
Let's go. I mean, let's talk about the ending before the ending, right? Because this game kind of has two endings. It's got the ending to its own central story, and then it's got the ending that we all know is coming. So I guess let's talk about the first chunk of it all, and this is gonna lead us to talk about kind of the core characters of this game. Um, Really, off by talking just broadly about Genesis. How did you guys feel about Genesis?
Why?
This is really exciting for me, by the way, as someone I've known about this shit for years, and I've always kind of, but like no one I've known has really ever played this game, so it's like I haven't really been able to broadly talk to anyone about it. So this is really exciting for me.
I mean, I can only start by asking the question why, and I will ask it repeatedly. And it's a rhetorical question in part because I know why. It's to create content, to create a game, to make money with character designs and a story you already have established that people are going to buy into. I do not understand Genesis. I don't, aside from the fact that he has an inferiority complex with Sephiroth and is degenerating at any given moment. I don't understand the motives behind what he's doing. He's supposed to be some charismatic guy giving, quotes from a play that don't even make sense in the context of the situation he's giving them half the time.
Well, sort of, yeah.
Sort of. I understand what they're going for. Still, it doesn't really, unless you're intricately familiar with everything, which
Well,
I would assume a lot of people are. Like, a lot of it's going to go over your head.
I think the core problem with Genesis as a character is he's so built and contingent on the poem that is a play in Universal
Right,
Loveless. He's so
right,
contingent on that work, but we're never fully presented that work
right.
until the very end of the game, and only barely. in the final dungeon you can find fragments of the poem on these like stones and throughout the dungeon, and like with those you can kind of like piece together the poem. And Genesis' whole thing is he's obsessed with this poem. He loves this poem, and he kind of feels that he, Angeal, and Sephiroth are living it out.
Right.
They're the three men, the three heroes in the story, and he Genesis feels that he is the hero, and he is going to find this what the goddess of
The
I
gift
forget
of
what
the goddess.
the gift of the goddess. Thank you. He is going to find the gift of the goddess at the end, and that's what's going to cure him of his degradation. That he's kind of interpreting this and applying it to his real life situation, um, which is very convenient. I guess you could look at it as a very convenient plot device that,
Right.
oh, he happens to be friends with two other guys and they have this big epic situation. Oh, it's just like this poem I read and I'm obsessed with. But yeah, that's kind of the core of the core issue with his characters. Just we don't have much context behind Loveless outside of the billboard that's in Final Fantasy VII that we
Right.
see, and him spouting random lines every time you run into him.
Yeah, for to give a good comparison, it's not like for Final Fantasy fans, it's not like Opera Maria and Draco from Final Fantasy VI, where there's a very clear parallel being drawn between one of the main characters' arcs and a play that you are watching unfold that they are acting in.
Right. And like they're kind of going, I mean, they're trying to catch lightning twice, and that's essentially what this is, right? They
Yeah.
are this is applying to their scenario in a way. Genesis is kind of misunderstanding and misrepresenting it, but it is applying. It's just very hard to follow when it just happens sporadically throughout the game. It's never cohesively provided to the player, and even even the other characters in the story are annoyed by it.
Yeah, ostensibly, aside from that, the Loveless motivation, his immediate motivation is to stop the degradation, which is being caused by the experimental genetic mutations that went on
Yeah, and
with
I want to
Soldier.
center on that for a moment. Did you guys catch that your first go around? Like,
Yes, I
Yeah.
understood. I understood
okay.
that, like, okay, these guys are an older generation of Soldier. It didn't work out well. It wasn't Hojo didn't do it. It was some other lesser guy or something like that. There was a
Well,
conflict,
okay,
whatever.
let me be clear. Like that whole aspect I gathered pretty easily. It's when they start involving Angeal's mother and how Genesis fits into all that. I don't know why I just didn't follow it. I was a little confused as to how that all applied. And like, yeah, to double back, Project G is not Project Genesis. It's
Yes,
Project Jillian, Angeal's
yes.
mom, and that this is kind of where things start to tie into Final Fantasy VII, where
Well, I'm pretty sure don't as when you first meet Jillian, I'm pretty sure they show her name in the subtitles, and that was kind of my first clue into it, I think.
well, yeah, yes,
And also just
um,
her demeanor, she didn't seem I mean, she seemed worried, but she was more sad and regretful than like
I
freaking out
mean,
like a mother.
there could be any number of reasons for that.
But I mean, yes, the dialogue in this game is god awful, but like the vibe I got from her when I walked in being charitable was that she had a deeper understanding of what was going on.
Yeah, okay,
So I was kind of clued into it, and then they kind of confirmed it.
okay. Delilah, is there
Yeah, no,
anything
I was just gonna say, my bigger issue with Genesis as a character, period, is that I feel like they tried to make him so important, but for
Yeah,
me, he wasn't. And
yeah.
he's
I'm
not. He's not.
right, like he's like the last boss, and then he's not dead, but then we just don't know like what happens. And so I'm hoping that for like remake's sake, that maybe they'll bring him back in a way that feels substantial, not just like, oh, he's
I
back
And
and he's still annoying and not
I
important, you know?
hope to God they don't. I was
well,
infuriated that they inserted him into the Nibelheim incident scene.
So here,
That
yeah, well,
infuriated me.
that I think was going a step too far, especially because um they made changes to the Nibelheim incident when there was an anime, a brief anime that was released called Last Order Final Fantasy VII that made some, I don't want to say drastic. It made some changes to the Nibelheim incident, and they received a lot of backlash from fans about that. So, when developing this game and knowing that that incident was going to play a role in the plot, they kind of wanted to make sure that they didn't step on any toes there. And yet they still kind of did. The only benefit of the doubt I can give the scenario writers on this what is the fact that our recollection of the Nibelheim incident in Final Fantasy VII uh, is entirely predicated on
Unre-
secondhand knowledge.
Multiple
Yeah.
unreliable
Right,
narrators, not
and
just
like
Cloud. Yeah,
even the area where Genesis walks in and talks, Cloud isn't present in the room during
right,
that scene,
right.
so very well, when he recalls the incident and pretends that he's, in that scenario, in Final Fantasy VII scenario, he just might not he had no idea Genesis was there. So I could see them getting away with it under that pretense. But it's still, yeah, I kind of agree with you, Jason. It still kind of bothered me. Like, this is a character, frankly, I simply don't like, and they're inserting him into this very key point of Final Fantasy VII's plot that leads to its biggest twist. He doesn't belong there. I don't want him there.
He's also he's also extremely just stupid. There are so many incidents in cutscenes where he can clearly just kill Zack, which he has every reason to do because again, his immediate goal was to stop the degradation, and Zack was in his way. And there are just so many times. And then
Well,
he
to be
just said,
fair,
"If
he
I'll
wasn't.
die, I'll take the planet with me," which I guess goes back to the play, but again, it's so vague and
Yeah.
it's
To be fair, Zach wasn't in his way for like the entirety of the game,
not the
but I
entirety.
I get your point. But that's also kind of like that's kind of just like a common plot trope with a lot of these kinds of things,
I
right? Like,
mean, he really just exists because Sephiroth doesn't become the antagonist until a good chunk through, and they can't keep him as the antagonist.
and
That's really
yeah,
all the only reason he exists.
it would be like if the final boss came an entire act too soon. Like,
Right.
Genesis kind of like separated, like taking yourself out of the plot a little bit. Like, Genesis is basically there to give Zack his own villain, so they don't just rehash Sephiroth and try to shove Sephiroth into situations he shouldn't be in. Cloud yeets him into the Mako reactor. He's not coming back until the midpoint of Final Fantasy VII. They're not, and they didn't try to fuck with that, and that I at least appreciate. But Genesis is still, he doesn't serve as a particularly good villain in my opinion, and it sounds like in your guys' opinion too.
No.
Yeah, honestly, like going into the game, I have for years tried to refrain from touching any of the compilation material and just keep the memory of the original,
I mean,
which
I'll go ahead and say Advent Children
but
is worth your time, but that's maybe just my
oh,
opinion.
I've seen Advent Children at
Okay,
this point.
okay,
I have seen it. I have criticisms. I understand why some people like it, but it is what at
yeah,
least it's continuing rather than changing. I don't know.
yeah.
Anyway, um, but like going into this, like I knew nothing about it other than obviously where it ends and the
Mhm.
original Final Fantasy VII. So I always thought that this game would basically be just Zack rising through the ranks, like in the war with Wutai. I thought the war with Wutai would play a far more role, which would make sense from a world building perspective, and he would have his mentor character. That I think that just would have worked fundamentally better than f- finding a need to give him like this singular antagonist that is somehow connected to everybody. Sephiroth, his mentor Zack, even Cloud to some extent. I guess I don't know. But it's just
Yeah, I agree with you. The the war with Wutai is used as a plot device for all of one chapter. Um, it would have been better if that was the focus throughout the entire game, and it could have built the relationship between Angeal and Zack a whole lot more. Um, it's a core uh a point in history for Final Fantasy VII that isn't really explored until this game, and even this game, it's hardly explored. And
No, it's
then,
just used for side quests.
yeah, yeah, you end the war after chapter 1. It's just like, oh, gotta kill the remnants of the Wutai. Oh,
Man,
Yuffie
those
sent me another email.
and those Wutai soldiers, man, they are fond of building lots of trapdoors in their fortresses. Oh my god,
Yeah.
it's like every wall you press a button and it just flips around and there are soldiers on the other side. They
Oh,
basically built
well,
their.
yeah.
It's actually funny when you think about it from like a practical perspective, building your defensive fortifications as a maze, like, and having to get your own soldiers to the front lines.
Yeah. The other thing I do want to bring up about Genesis is because he weirdly going into this game has a history of his own. And I don't know how much you guys know about this. The secret ending to Dirge of Cerberus, a spin-off game that came out, I think about 1 to 2 years prior to Crisis Core, actually was the debut of Genesis, where um, the main villain of that game comes and finds him, and or Genesis finds him, I forget. And he was portrayed by Japanese rock star Gact,
Yes, I read about this.
who composed 2 songs for Dirge of Cerberus' soundtrack. And then yeah, they wanted to, with Christ bring developing Crisis Core, they wanted to bring Genesis back and ask Gact if he wanted to reprise his role and do the voice work, Japanese voice work, and he did. So yeah, this character is heavily based in appearance and everything. He's heavily based on a Japanese rock star, who also wore Genesis's outfit for a lot of his concerts surrounding the era of these games coming out.
Oh,
So
cool.
fun bit of trivia. But yeah, Genesis has a history going into this game. It's a very small one, but still. But anyway, yeah, going back to Genesis's fate after you beat him, he gets the gift of the goddess, and Delilah, because I know Jason didn't go and do all 300 missions to actually fight Minerva.
I thought
Um,
going into this that I was gonna be ready to do a bunch of side content. I did 2 missions and I was like, nah.
Good
Which
for
I guess we can
you.
talk about later. Yeah.
yeah, we'll talk about that later. But Delilah, I guess the implication is, and from my research, from what I can tell, is that it was just another materia
Hmm.
to summon Minerva, this goddess summon, and that was essentially the gift of the goddess. Somehow miraculously, that's what that cured his degradation.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
go
I
ahead.
just assumed that it going into the whole live stream thingy. I just assumed that that was just a way to like make her a summon. I didn't really get it, to be
It
honest.
was
It
really
just,
vague.
yeah.
Yeah, I found it weird that you get that cutscene where he walks towards the goddess and she gives him a glaring look, and then it's like almost implied that she takes his spirit into the light and absorbs it into the live stream,
Hmm.
and then his body is just there, and then Zack carries it out. So I'm like, okay, so he's dead, and Zack wants to bury him with like soldier on or whatever, and then he just wakes up and starts talking, and I'm
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah, it's a little unclear, it's a little vague, and I think intentionally so. And I kind of always wondered and had and felt that there was there were plans to do more with him in the future, and I guess those plans just never came to fruition. They never did another Final Fantasy VII compilation thing. Besides remake, so yeah, very well Rebirth or whatever the third remake game very well might do something with this character, because Dirge of Cerberus introduced him, and Dirge of Cerberus, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Chronologically speaking, is the last thing to happen in this universe.
Hmm.
That happens 3 years after the original game. So for him to be in the secret ending, alive, awake, and returning, so to speak, as the last line of Loveless kind of implies.
Well,
Um,
in the ending series of cutscenes, don't Reno and Rude like recover his body, or somebody
So it
don't the
wasn't
Turks?
it's not Reno and Rude, it's White Vice and Nero from
Yeah.
Deep Ground, the two guys
Oh,
that
okay.
are in Dirt of Cerberus,
I'm
and
sorry.
they
I think I'm confusing it because in the next cutscene, Reno and Rude are like looking for
yeah.
Cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, Genesis's fate is left really vague, and yeah, he's kind of a crappy villain anyway. So
Yeah, I feel like they're gonna make Genesis important in the remake.
of
I
course they
really
are.
do. I just have a feeling.
yeah, well, we'll talk more about.
Actually, I'm interested to see because Nomura is not part of the second one, is he? Part two?
I think so.
I thought he stepped back. I thought he was no longer
I
director.
think he's well, yeah. I don't think he's as involved as he was, but I'm sure he'll still be involved in a significant way.
Because
He's kind
Genesis
of
like is very obviously a chance for or an excuse for Nomura to draw a very ridiculous character, but which he loves doing. But I mean, amongst other things. But like I don't know. I'm curious. I mean, may the gods be good that we don't get Genesis in any more
yeah.
Final
Well,
Fantasy products.
we'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about the future for Genesis potentially at the end of the episode before we get
Right.
too deep into remake stuff. All right, let's move on to the second ending, so to speak, of this game, which is kind of what we all knew was coming. And I this is something I actually want to talk a little positively about because um my partner just played through Final Fantasy VII, and I know the ins and outs of that game pretty well. So I had and the scene where you see Zack die is actually completely optional, hidden, and not obvious to see in the original game. You have to
Right.
go kind of out of your way to really find out anything about Zack other than he was another person that was at Nibelheim during the Nibelheim incident, and he's who Cloud is confusing himself with. So when you see the scene of Zack dying in Seven, he just kind of gets shot off screen and like falls back onto screen, and two soldiers come up and just Shinra grunts, I should say, just kind of shoot him up, and that's kind of it. So I really like what they did here, where it's not just two grunts, but it's an entire army of people, and he's basically fighting for his life. How did you guys feel about this sequence, this final sequence?
I feel like the entire game did not deserve this ending.
Yeah, it's basically aside from I can't even say the Nibelheim incident because they inserted Genesis into it. It's really the only part of the game that I could really appreciate at all because it was faithful. They didn't change. I mean, aside from embellishing, as you just said.
Yeah.
Um,
But
I mean,
embellishing is like that's okay if they
yeah,
make meaningful embellishments, and I feel like they really did here.
they did. And here's my problem: Zack Fair in Final Fantasy VII is not a character. He is an idealization in both Aerith and Cloud's minds. He is Aerith's first love when she was young and is idealized by her, and he is the idealized version of a hero that Cloud is not but wishes he could be, which is part of what caused, aside from the trauma, obviously, of what happened, is part of what causes this identity crisis, psychotic break, what have you.
Yeah.
And that is further illustrated by the end of the game where Cloud just embraces the fact that he isn't this stoic, distant gruff. He is a goofball, and he embraces it. And there's back and forth where the party makes fun of him and the things he says as the game reaches its climax, which is showing Cloud embracing who he really is, not this idealized hero that Zack is. And for me, as much as I appreciate them being faithful and adding those extra pieces to make Zack look like a hero in the end, everything that comes before it, in my mind, making Zack an actual character is not only unnecessary, but harms the original story. That's my hot take.
I don't know that I'd go that far. I think if the story was better, right? Like if there were other reasons to to present Zack and build up his character, I feel like your perception might be different.
Maybe that's
I would
fair.
hope that it would be, because I don't think it colors the original game in a negative way. I think it's just they did make Zack into a more interesting character with this game. They just did it in a really poorly conducted and just meandering and plot with a really bad antagonist.
I mean, the thing, like, now when I think of Zack, instead of associating him with this mysterious hero that Cloud looks up to, he's the guy who fucking does squats all the time. Like, he'll just be having conversations with people and break into squats.
Yeah,
He
I
shouldn't need the Buster Sword at that
I
point.
mean,
He
this
should just
is
be able to fight with his ass.
I I know people. I know people who listen to this podcast regularly will get tired of me making these comparisons, but I do it because everybody's seen it.
oh boy,
It's
here we
the
go.
Darth Vader Anakin Skywalker
Oh
dilemma.
boy.
Do you really need to know
All right.
how
Oh,
Darth
wait,
Vader
wait, wait,
became
wait, wait,
Darth
wait, wait,
Vader?
wait, 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 wait. I don't.
Which is it's a little different, but like you get my point.
Yes, because George Lucas had been planning to show
I know
that.
that. Yes, I know. I've read the original Star Wars 1970 script. It's like 300 pages long.
Yeah,
It has the entire saga mapped out in it. Yeah, I know.
right. So like it's not quite the same, because at least George Lucas had always had that plan. He'd always had that written,
I'm
and
I'm not
eventually
I'm not
go ahead.
saying that I'm not saying it's a one for one comparison. I'm just trying to give something
I
for
know,
people to understand.
and
Yeah.
you have a very negative feeling about prequels in general, and I,
Yes,
for the
I do.
record, I completely agree. This is not a good prequel, because
Yes.
it tells a complete it ostensibly tells a completely unrelated story, messily tries to tie it in with previous lore that we've already known about, and then just ends on an arbitrary ending that it knows that it's heading towards. That again is pretty disconnected from everything that this game itself has to offer. The whole last act is just, it's presented because it has to be presented. Whereas if they had done something that would have led them, like, do the Wu Tai War and then lead into increased monster activity out in the plains, and that's what leads them to Nibelheim. That's the reason they go to Nibelheim in the first place. But they kind of try to tie in this whole Genesis copy and the Genesis army with the whole idea, and well, at that point you think Genesis is dead. Well, it's not just Genesis copies; it's also Angeal copies that are just running amok. That's what they're kind of trying how they're trying to tie things together, and it's a mess. Like,
Yeah.
there were easier and more organic ways to do this, and I don't want to get hung up on what this game isn't, because I think that's a
Right.
really bad
It
way of criticizing something.
Yeah, I made
But
similar comments about remake, how I actually, as much as I didn't like that game, I did praise the way they handled the Wu-Tai lore, like the Wu-Tai conflict lore,
yeah,
and embellished on it. And had this game been, just about the Wu-Tai War and then leading into the events we know, I probably would have appreciated it more. That and better writing. But yeah.
I think the thing is, even the parts of the game that were a little more interesting, the relationships, such as the relationship between Zack and Angeal, and even Zack and Aerith, I feel like they could have done more to like flesh out those relationships,
yeah.
and they just didn't do enough. Where that ending, like I said, felt earned. Like you see Aerith, like with the rain and stuff like that. And it's emotional, but you just don't have that like historical background to feel the weight of it as much as I at least wanted to.
No, I completely agree. Like I said, I feel like the whole third act of this game, at least the aspects that are inherited from Final Fantasy VII, the original game, like they feel like a totally different universe almost,
Yeah.
and I know it's partly because it's what we're most intimately familiar with. It's what we've seen before. It's what we know and what we've come to expect when going through this game. But it's like in stark contrast with that's like the good shit in this game, and it's surrounded by all sorts of what the fuck shit. It's just
Yeah.
it's just really a mess. But I do want to keep talking about The Last Stand, because there is an aspect that I at first wasn't sure I liked, and the more I think about it, the more I actually appreciate it. I want to talk about the good presentation, like the only instance where, or the only instances I should say, where I actually appreciated the DMW system.
Oh yeah, this kind of reminded me a little bit of Doki Doki Literature Club. Or was
Yeah.
it Doki? Like Doki Doki and like Nier Automata a little bit, just in the way that they use the UI to like demonstrate an emotion.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, like yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't want to spoil either what those games do with what you're
Yeah.
saying, but I totally see what you're saying, and I totally agree. Like the DMW stands for Digital Mind Wave, and it's basically a representation of Zach's memories, feelings, and thoughts, and you kind of progress that throughout the game. And we'll talk about the bad when we talk about more gameplay systems, but you kind of progress that by just seeing memories and thoughts and feelings of Zax as like through naturally through gameplay, and you get like these random memories. Certain story events will heighten his emotions for a certain character and whatnot. And in during The Last Stand, like all his mind kind of begins to break as he's taking more damage, taking more hurt from the Shinra soldiers. I wasn't sure I liked it at first because it seemed kind of cheesy, but when I think about it in like the meta contextual way that it's presenting it, I kind of love it. It's
Hmm.
really really neat.
Conceptually, I love it, but once again, had they deep digger bigger, had they deep digger, I can't speak. Had
Dig
they
deeper,
deeped bigger, right?
deep bigger,
Had
dig deeper.
they
Yes.
Oh man,
Sorry guys, I had a hard day.
it's okay.
You know,
It's only about to get harder. We're gonna talk for like another hour about
had
Crisis
they
Core.
digged deeper into those relationships throughout the story,
Yeah,
that moment would have felt so much more impactful. Because you're right, it is conceptually very interesting the way it like melded with gameplay too. It just like it was neat, but it didn't have as much weight as it could have.
yeah. And like the way that it kind of it starts with the characters, like all the characters in the DMW, they're obviously there because they're somewhat close to Zach. And I really liked how like the first ones to go are the ones furthest from him in terms of like importance, and that thus leads to the last face to disappear as he's just totally deteriorating in battle is Aerith.
And it's also
And
kind
Yeah.
of like a not expectation. They get because Aerith's limit break is the healing wave, so like it almost builds that anticipation that he's gonna get a second wind, and then
yeah.
doesn't. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
It's
it is clever. It is a very like near thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like you'd almost think they consulted Yoko Taro. Like, how can we make what like kind of neat thing can we do to make this game somewhat tolerable or thought provoking?
Right.
But yeah, like I the more I thought about that happening, the more I kind of loved it. And at the end, Zach is just like, you press the attack button and it's like it's laborious for him to swing the Buster Sword, and he can't kill the soldiers. Like he can do damage to them, but they just won't go down, and they just keep shooting at him and beating him down until it's done. Um
Yeah.
and then yeah, they obviously
Yeah. It
they
reminds me of the microwave hall and
yeah, oh
Metal Gear
god.
Solid.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I God,
Speaking of games that use the interface and gameplay to, yeah.
yeah, I almost don't want to bleep that out because I think that's a really good comparison. I don't
Well,
want
I
to.
didn't
I'm not.
specify, and I
No,
just said
yeah, yeah, yeah.
microwave
You
hall.
know what? I'll leave it
Yeah,
in. I'll leave it in. I won't
because
say anything.
unless you know what I'm talking about, you're not gonna pick. Yeah.
Yeah, let's just say if you know, you know. Um, yeah, and then so they make the whole they embellish Cloud. Uh, they actually give a final conversation between Cloud and Zack, and kind of embellish that ending. Obviously, it's the end of the game, so they have to have like a very dramatic, sweeping sequence to lead into the credits. And I think it was really effective. Like, yeah, I forget which one of you said it, but this game does not deserve this ending.
Yeah, I said that.
Delilah, yeah.
Delilah said, "Okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't 100% sure."
That should just be the title of the video when we put it on YouTube and put the podcast. Yeah.
It
Good
was
job, Delilah.
yeah. like it's an ending out of obligation, but not an ending that this game really necessarily deserved. And there are ways it could have earned it. There are ways it could have deserved it, but they didn't really do that, and they probably at this point they never will. Um,
And I
Yeah.
guess I guess we can just mention it now because I don't see a note for it. But given that this Cloud is integral to this ending, the minimal appearance of Cloud, while it does make sense story wise, given the original game, if you were going to embellish Zack's character and build up this ending to be more, you needed more Cloud and Zack relationship.
So, what I'll say on that, and what I'll say about the relationships that Zach has kind of with these other characters, they are there. This is where the flaws of the DMW system come in, where there's a lot of like core scenes that are building up his relationships with these characters that are part of the random nature of the DMW. So, Jason, you probably didn't see like
Oh shit!
75.
I skipped every time it gave me the option for
Well,
triangle to skip things
oh, no, 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 no,
during the
no, no.
gameplay.
It wasn't those. They would happen where like you see the light kind of sweep in and then it gives you a cutscene briefly.
Oh yeah, I thought that was referencing something from earlier in the game. I had no idea that was something totally
Well,
different.
they technically are referencing things, but like things that you haven't seen. They're actually added scenes
So
of
basically, it's like stuff in those time jumps in the game.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, or it's just like scenes that would happen like you can kind of think like narratively speaking and metatextual contextually speaking that like while like in older Final Fantasies while characters are traversing the open world like they're not doing it in silence, right? They're probably talking to one another, and the same could be said here when Zack's like out in the streets. Like they're not gonna inundate you with cutscenes. Like potentially, who knows, he could be having conversations during those times when you're walking around. And that's kind of what the DMW is trying to show, that like in those time jumps, in those times where you're walking around Midgar, maybe there's things that are actually like story things that are actually happening. The problem is they're all randomized and all presented via the DMW system. So unless you luck out and get those scenes or are actively trying to get them, you're not going to see them. And this was especially apparent to me with Sephiroth's entry in the DMW, because there's a whole journey to the Nibelheim Mako reactor from Nibelheim to that reactor in the original game. Like you fall down off the bridge and like have to take a different way through the caves, and you learn about how materia is created. That scene is in this game. It's just one
Hmm.
of those randomized DMW cutscenes that you might not see.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Because you just get like a montage in the actual game, right? Or not the actual game, but like the cutscene leading up to the Nibelheim
I
incident.
don't even think there's really much of anything. I think you have to you do like the walk and that's kind of it.
Yeah,
Like
that's
you
what I
don't
meant by the
but like
montage.
no
It's Tifa taking pictures or whatever, or not Tifa. Somebody taking pictures of Tifa guiding you
Yeah, you
around.
do see that you do
Yeah.
see the picture of the three of them get taken, but like the journey to the reactor isn't really presented the same way that it's presented in the
Right.
original game, and the scenes that you would expect to see are kind of in the DMW. So like obviously Jason didn't see them,
Yeah.
and I that's kind of where I take an issue with a lot of aspects of the DMW system, but we'll
I
talk more.
did not even realize that that was a thing. Like
Yeah,
until you just said it now. Yeah.
we'll talk more about the DMW, the flaws of the DMW later, but that's an important thing I wanted to bring up to because to your point, Jason, like those would have helped bring up or those would have helped build those relationships, and with Cloud especially, like there's scenes of them being pals. There's scenes of them talking. There's scenes of Zack looking out for him when he's not feeling well. There's scenes there. I think there's one or two when they're running away in the after the climax of the game.
Yeah.
That stuff is just randomized. You might not see it unless you're trying to see it.
It's one of those things where like I said before, I prefer Cloud not really having a relationship with Zack and having an idealized vision of him. But if this is the direction they're going with the game, then yeah, you need more Cloud. And if it is in the DMW, WMD, whatever it is, um, then that's kind of an issue.
Yeah. Um And I liked the way they presented Cloud in this game. Like like they presented him exactly the right way. In
Right.
when you get
They
to
presented him.
Nibelheim,
They presented him like he is at the end of the original, when he embraces who he really is.
yeah, he's plucky, he's upbeat,
Hmm.
and when you get to Nibelheim, like he's obviously very nervous and anxious because he left there with a specific goal in mind and he hasn't achieved that goal. I think one of the DMW sequences, no, it might have just been an email, and I'm kind of disappointed we didn't actually get to see this in the game. Like he was like, "Hey, can do you maybe want to go over with me to have dinner with my mom?" Like,
Oh yeah.
there is some relationship building there. It's just, yeah, it's not outwardly presented very well to the player, and that's kind of disappointing. And that extends to other characters, and we'll talk about them shortly. But I don't know. I think overall Zach was presented as he was presented as a good enough character in this game. I feel I did
Yeah,
grow to
he's
like him a
definitely
lot.
likable.
Yeah.
Like he's
Um.
just like very dedicated, very goofy, and he's just willing to do anything to help people. Like he goes above and beyond, and it's like
Yeah.
admirable. But once again, like his who he is could have been extended more through the relationships.
Yeah. I will also add there's been a lot of controversy surrounding, and we'll talk more about this when we talk about the differences in versions, but there's been a lot of controversy talking about his voice work in Reunion versus his original voice actor. Um
Yeah, it's
I
not
mean,
good.
well, it's not great. Look, I didn't have a problem. Well, no, I didn't have a problem with it at first. It is in my opinion, it is objectively worse than the original voice work. Um, but like, if you're really that upset about it, get over it. Zach Gomez is not gonna be voicing Zach again, and it's a shame, but it is what it is. So embrace it.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the voice actor could use some improvement though, because he felt very like, yeah, guys, let's go do this, and I don't know, it felt very old school, but like not in a good way.
It
What
felt
are
like
you doing, Genesis? Where's your honor?
it felt like he was trying to emulate the original voice over work by Zach Gomez a little too closely, and as a result it just feels very forced
Yeah,
rather
it
than
does feel
him
forced.
putting, and I believe the voice actor is for this for Zach this in this game, and is Caleb Pierce.
Yeah, and I
I
mean,
don't like I said,
to be to
I
be
don't think it's that bad, but go
yeah,
ahead.
to be fair to the voice actors, they're not really given great material to be working with here.
Yeah, well, that's not
So even the good
untrue.
voice actors, like,
And I think it's also especially grating because, unlike the original version of Crisis Core, basically every line is voiced,
right,
where maybe 40% of what's voiced in this game was what was voiced in the PSP game.
right.
Like, it was a significantly smaller amount of voice work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people realize, like, nowadays it might seem inconvenient for people to hit X through text boxes, but there was a magic to reading the dialogue that voice acting doesn't always achieve, and having to write scripts for voice acting doesn't always achieve.
Yeah. There's something special about inferring your own tone and
Yes,
your
exactly.
own performance in your head.
Especially with
Um,
a character like Cloud, who is very much supposed to, in his struggle to be like this iconic hero, and is actually a goofball that's pretty much, the same thing as the player, or most players, like, who are kids growing up playing this game.
yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's move on and talk about some other characters. Unless there's anything else you guys wanted to add about Zack and Cloud. Um,
I mean, at this point, well, I guess we can wait till we talk about Angeal to talk about the significance of the
that
Buster
that
Sword.
that's who I'm going into next.
Okay,
So
Mhm.
if
cool.
yeah, I figure we'll talk about all three of them consecutively because, yeah, the Buster Sword is obviously an iconic piece of weaponry in video games in general, but especially in Final Fantasy VII. And in this game, it's built up even more.
Totally not taken from Berserk.
I mean, okay.
I just wanna, especially the dude just passed away.
Yeah.
Give him his respects, his fair due.
What did you guys how did you guys feel about Angeal? But I understand a lot of the problem is we don't spend a lot of time with these
Hmm.
characters, and what we do spend is like locked behind DMW. I get that. I know that's going to be a criticism that hangs over every conversation we have regarding these characters. But with what is presented, with what you did see, how did you feel about Angeal as a character, as a mentor to Zack?
I feel like his relationship with Zach was probably the most substantial of any other relationship, simply because he definitely felt like a father figure slash mentor initially, and then there was this mystery of like where he went and what he was doing before we found out like what happened to him.
Yeah.
And then like when he finally died and like like said the Buster Sword is like yours to wield, it felt more impactful than like anything else aside from the very end of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that it's definitely the most substantial relationship in it in terms of character development. Um, that arc obviously has the most impact on Zack as a character, even if they show or kind of like speed through it in like a montage of him crying when we get to the part. I think you guys know what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but again, weighed down by weird, nebulous dialogue. In order to be a hero, you need to have dreams and honor. It's pretty vague and nebulous, like just weird. And
I feel like
there are some genuine good nuggets, like when he says, "You're more important than my sword," just a little bit. Like that is
yeah.
a genuinely good line. Um, again, but as the game goes on, I start to have, even though I like Angela as a mentor, I have the same problem that I have with inserting Genesis, in that Angelo has the same fundamental problem of the degradation. And at
Yep.
first, it seems like Angeal betrays Soldier, goes to help Genesis. But over the course of the game, it seems like at times Genesis and Angeal are in conflict, and Angeal is working with you, and then at times he's working with Angeal. It's very confused, and I don't understand what
Yeah.
exactly he's doing.
It it kind of
And
feels like sorry Jason, finish your
no,
thought.
I don't even know where I was going, because I don't really get it. And then it ends with like a copy of him being possessed by the director of Soldier. Like I really, like they started
Well,
off
I
with a
think
good foundation for what could have been a great character, and it just spiraled.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Angel starts off so promising. Like
Yes, exactly.
he comes off as such a great mentor to Zach. That line that if you didn't single out that line, Jason, I would have, because that line is fantastic. The
It's the best
delivery of
piece
it,
of dialogue in the entire game. Yeah.
yeah, it's a great character moment, and it builds up their relationship so well. Um, before it's kind of assassinated by Angel leaving and you not seeing him for a while and only
Right.
sporadically until he dies. Um, and yeah, it does feel like I guess the implication is that the subplot behind Genesis's like core plot line is that Hollander, the person leading Project G, and he has an inferiority complex like Genesis does to Sephiroth. There's a parallel there between Hollander and his inferiority complex with Hojo,
Right.
both of which were the scientists that led their respective projects, revolving around those two people. And it seems like Angeal is kind of in conflict with just like I guess the implication is he's conflicted about whether or not to enable Genesis and Hollander to take their revenge, and by extension Lazard to take their revenge on Shinra. Um, but yeah, it just he inevitably a few chapters later, after us not really seeing him or doing any much with him, he decides to help Zack. And in the end, after you seemingly kill Genesis, he just labels himself as a monster as part of the experiment he's gone through, and basically forces Zack to kill him by merging with a bunch of his own copies.
Hmm.
It's it's a little weird.
Yeah,
And
very weird.
yeah,
But
in general, I just want to say I had this as its own bullet point. I think uh oh I as part of another, but like the pseudoscience in this game, like it, like I said, I asked earlier if you guys were following like what this game's plot was trying to say with regards to the copies, just because I kind of didn't. I had to do a little bit of reading, but like that mostly is contingent on I wasn't sure what the difference was between I wasn't initially sure of what the difference was between Project S and Project G, and the difference is ultimately that it was a difference in how they applied Genova cells to the fetuses that they injected them with.
Right,
Right,
because
Sephiroth was a direct injection of Genova cells in the
right,
womb, whereas
whereas it was Jillian, right? They it was in her
Jillian,
womb, yeah.
she was injected with Genova cells, and then her cells were passed through to Angeal naturally through birth and injected into Genesis, rather than just Genova cells, and that's like what led to the degradation. But like it's just so silly, and yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about it. It's very silly. It's very roundabout and convoluted, unnecessary.
unnecessarily,
It's like
yeah.
What more can I say?
it's like expansion of lore, or not even expansion, just added chunks of lore that are unneeded, serve no purpose, and just confuse the player.
Yeah. But it does, like, that's the long roundabout explanation as to why Angeal and Genesis can create copies of themselves. The reason Angeal can copy himself onto monsters or people is because he was a natural born child from Jillian. Again, a weird explanation, but whatever. I guess we will take it.
You know, while we're talking about the science and the degradation, can I just make or and ask your guys' opinion on this? I find it extraordinarily stupid. So for people who don't know, or maybe I just need to remind you, the one wing angel concept, that was just Sephiroth's final
Yeah.
boss design in the original game. It was just a cool final boss design. Now we have an entire game where all the main antagonists, well, then the mentor, all have the one wing, and it's like different colors, which is supposed to, like, be a foil for Sephiroth. It's like, understand when something like was cool and worked in small doses. Like, keep it simple. Like, you don't need to just keep hammering wings and
Well,
feathers
I
and
think it wasn't necessarily just it wasn't necessarily just that it was a cool
I get the
boss
symbology.
design.
I get the
Yeah,
symbology of
like
it, but
it became a symbol, right, for Sephiroth's status as this fucked up experiment conducted by his evil scientist
yeah,
father.
the disgraced hero, the fallen angel, and
Yeah,
who is trying to become a god, or well, with
right.
Genova, yeah.
They lean they I agree that they do lean way too far into it in this game, and it kind of loses a lot of meaning when they keep rehashing it and forcing it onto these other characters. I kind of do wonder if that was kind of forced on because of the popularity of Sephiroth and Cloud's designs in Kingdom Hearts. Cloud is also given a one wing in Kingdom Hearts, so
Oh
Jason's face
god,
right now.
I
I
forgot
kind
about
of
that. I
yeah.
forgot. I had wiped
I
that
have
from my memory.
a
Jesus
figure of it
Christ.
if you want me to pull it down.
No, please.
um but yeah, like I kind of wonder if they were like, oh yeah, the one wing concept that's really hot with the kids.
Yeah,
Let's
I
keep that
mean,
going.
it's only cool when it's with Sephiroth, okay? Even like like my partner doesn't like play Final Fantasy, but
Yeah.
he's aware of the One Wing Angel because Kenny Omega, who's his favorite wrestler, embodies like in his character Sephiroth and the One Winged Angel and stuff like that. So
Plus,
when he
it's an iconic piece of music too. Let's not forget.
right, exactly. And actually at the most recent Wrestle Kingdom, Kenny Omega came out with like the One Wing and the I mean with Sephiroth's outfit and the music and everything. He like actually paid for that song to be in his entrance. But anyway, um the point is that he saw me playing Crisis Core. He was like, "Wait, why does everyone else have one wing?" And I was like,
I
"I
mean,
know."
this is my point. It I mean, Crisis Core isn't going to make the one winged angel design lose like it's, but like it starts to numb you to it. And it
Yeah,
goes
I
back.
mean, I get it.
It goes back to the original design, or not design, but conception of Sephiroth, that they didn't show him for so long in the original game because they wanted it to be like Jaws, where you imagine what Sephiroth is, and it kind of builds it up.
And
And it's
then
almost like, and Kitase himself said that, so it's almost like
yeah.
he completely forgot that.
And even when yeah, even in the original, when you do see Sephiroth, there's still like there's still an air of mystery about it because it's not really him, you know.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
but I agree that it's frustrating and weird and starts to lose meaning when you see it done on so many different characters.
Yeah.
But
But
back to sorry, go ahead,
I was
Donna.
just gonna say, going back to Angeal's
Yeah.
character, he's the one character that I felt like his relationships were the most meaningful.
Hmm.
Even though Zack's the main character, like even his relationship with Sephiroth, I felt like was more tender than like Zack and really anyone else
Hmm.
aside from Angeel. So it almost feels like as if Angeel was the main character because of his how his relationships were fleshed
Yeah,
out in this game.
I do want to call out probably the what I would say probably the best cutscene of the game is that flashback scene you get from Sephiroth of them fighting in the training room. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah.
it's a really cool scene. Really impressive that they rendered and had that on the PSP, by the way. But like it's a badass scene, and yeah, and Angeal as Genesis and Sephiroth, or Genesis really starts to take it a little too far. Angeal's the one that breaks them up.
Right.
um
Yeah.
like he kind of is, he's the role model for Zack, and he's like trying to be the role model just like for this game story, for this for everyone in this world. And like there's even there's I think his fan club kind of mentions this, or somewhere it's mentioned somewhere in the game that he's kind of like, he is kind of like the de facto like poster child for soldier. He is the ideal soldier, whereas Sephiroth is kind of like the hero that everyone loves and admires, like Angeal, in a time before the end of the Wutai War, before he defects, like he was kind of the one that was looked up to both in and out of
Yeah.
soldier.
And I don't know if I'm skipping ahead, but when you have your, I won't say final duel, but your actual fight where you quote unquote kill him as Zack, that's really like what effectuates his character change, from for most of the game. Before that, he's just
Oh yeah.
kind of an annoying, like Luke Skywalker or New Hope, like kind of annoying, where you still like him, but like he's just doing squats all the time and it's weird. Um, and then you have what I think is, if I have to be honest, like kind of rushed, a weird montage of Zack just crying, and then you do get a cool scene, which I do kind of like, which is Zack, now first class, giving the speech to all the Shinra soldiers.
Yeah.
I just wish it had been less of a hard turn in that character shift and more gradual.
Yeah. But you're right. That is like a major. They do try to they try to present it as a major turning point for his character. I do
Yeah.
find it kind of weird that there's two ways that they try to show that. Both in him now being the possessor of the Buster Sword, which we'll talk about in a moment, but also he just kind of swoops this side of his hair back,
Yes. Yes.
and
Yeah.
I didn't even notice it. And like they like I think Aerith brings it up to him, and I'm like, wait, what's different? And then
Right.
I eventually like saw a picture of him with like his bangs, and I'm like, oh, okay. Who cares? Um, but yeah, let's talk a little bit about the Buster Sword. Um, which I think I don't believe any scenes had it in Reunion, but this was another controversial thing with the original PSP version. They changed the design of the Buster Sword a little bit to have like some like gold plating inlay at the hilt guard. They've since walked that back on Reunion, I believe. At least I didn't notice it in any scenes. I don't think any slipped by where they didn't change it. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, the Buster Sword. Um, we get some backstory on as to how that came to be. Whereas it was when he, I think it was when he joined Soldier. His
His
dad had it
father,
commissioned, yeah,
yeah, he went bankrupt getting it made for him. Yeah.
and was trying to pay it back for ages, and Angeal doesn't use it. It brings wear, tear, and rust. I kind of find it a little I find it a little, I guess, disingenuous of Zack when he inherits it, that he winds up, it becomes his main weapon. I don't. How do you guys feel about like the significance of the Buster Sword and once it
So
passes to Zack?
that line you just brought up, I really do. It's again like most of the best lines in this game are from Mangiel,
Hmm.
and that's a great line that really says a lot about the character, who he is as a person, his history, and his philosophy. Like you do so much with so little. It's again one of the few gems, the few golden nuggets in this game. Um, but honestly, like I didn't need a background for the Buster Sword in the original game. You get rid of it pretty quickly.
Well,
Uh, eh,
yes,
yes
but
and no, not in cutscenes. I get yes, but
and it's the only weapon. It's the only weapon in the game. I guess Barrett's Gatling gun you can't sell, but it's the only
right.
one of only two weapons of the game that you
That you
can't get
can't
rid
get.
of.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But my point is that it's more just supposed to be a symbolic like passage, not rite of passage, changing of the guard, like it passes from Angeal to Zack and then Zack to Cloud. I didn't need an elaborate history of it,
I mean, I don't.
although if they had done more with Angeal, if they'd done more with Zack, then maybe I could have like accepted it. Again, it's all like it's all premised on is the writing of the game good, is the story good, and it's just not.
I think um it's not that it got an elaborate backstory, right? Like it was commissioned for Angeal by his father, and that's basically it. And like, clearly Angeal has a sentimental approach toward it. He doesn't want to wear it out. He doesn't want it. He doesn't want to ruin this thing that his dad nearly died for him to have.
Right.
And it's supposed to be symbolic, representative of honor, of dreams and whatnot. And like that's Angeal's kind of whole shtick. You know, it's kind of like how many times they say the word truth and or trust. How many times they say the word trust in God of War Ragnarok? You know, how many times do they say the words dreams and honor in Crisis Core Final Fantasy
Mhm.
VII? It's a
Right.
little too much, but
Yeah.
like that's kind of his whole thing. And I think it is a little fucked up that Zack, once he inherits it, just immediately starts using it all the
For
time.
300 side missions.
Right. Well, that. Yeah, that's my point.
And
That's my
I'm
point,
really
though.
sad, but thanks, man. This is really gonna help.
Yeah, like that's my point, though. By giving it that backstory, which also that line that you mentioned, and I kind of spoke to, the line that he doesn't use it because use brings rust, wear, and tear.
Yeah,
That he's not just talking about the sword; he's talking about a person's soul from fighting.
yeah.
It's a philosophical comment. So, like the fact that when Zack inherits it, given now that we know its backstory and its value,
Hmm.
that Zack shows no regard for it, despite the fact we're supposed to assume that he has this relationship with Angeal, and you would think he would inherit that revere for the sword. Like it, it's kind of jarring. Yeah,
Yeah,
Definitely.
I think it should have been. Um, he should have inherited it, always carried it on his back, but still used a standard soldier sword in combat.
right. Like the
Um,
Buster Sword would be a special ability almost, or something like that.
yeah, like he would only use it in cutscenes in like desperate situations, or
Yeah,
yeah, maybe make it a very specific limit break or something that limits its use to stay true to what the story. It's
yeah,
kind of it's almost an example of ludonarrative dissonance,
yes,
a phrase that I know Jason loves so much. But like it kind of is an example, and it's only made worse with Reunion, because in Crisis Core it's basically just a palette swap. The When you inherit the Buster Sword in the PSP version, Jesus, there's no difference in anything. It's just a model change,
and
whereas
here it's like a
here
new gameplay mechanic.
they
Yeah,
added a whole new thing that to make to besides like all the UI enhancements to make this game be presented very similarly to Final Fantasy VII Remake, yeah, they made the Buster Sword kind of have a function slash feature like how it is in Remake, where you go into a specific stance and you take less damage. It's almost like blocking, and you could do strong attacks while in that stance. It's not as fleshed out as it was in Remake. um it's also significantly more frustrating to use than in Remake, but
How many times did you dodge when you tried to activate it?
oh, so many times.
Yep.
So many times. Bringing this back to another like cool meta contextual thing that's in the gameplay though. There's that whole proficiency meter that like slowly goes up as you're progressing through the game, and using the Buster Sword stance. Um, that caps out at 95%, which I think is kind of a neat little way of saying maybe Zack's not the true master of the Buster Sword.
Ah, did you actually max it out?
No, there's
I
no
was gonna
point.
say
Yeah.
it takes
How
forever.
how long? Yeah, it took me forever to get to like 2%. Like that's where I was
When
by the end of the
I
game, and I used it like repeatedly. That was one of my key strategies. Just so I was doing
I
it all the time. Like
I think I end when by the time I got the plat, I believe I had it somewhere in the high 80s.
Oh wow.
So I didn't max it, but if I played for a few more hours, I could probably max it. But like I said, there's no benefit to it. I think around 40 something percent is where you get the last upgrade. You can the last permanent upgrade that you can for increasing its proficiency. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to bring up the 95% cap because I think that's a really clever thing. I just saw that online. I didn't like I said, I didn't max it out, but I think that's a really clever thing for them to do. Is there anything else we want to talk about with the Buster Sword and
I guess
Angeal?
like it was just more meaningful when he passed it to Cloud, but then it makes things a little. I'm sure we'll talk about it later. A little more muddled for what remake is doing.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll talk about that. Um, yeah, and I do want to say, like, on the topic of Zack, like, if Zack hadn't used the Buster Sword, keeping in line with Angeal's approach to having it, it would make sense for Cloud to use it because he had no idea. He kind of inherited it when he was coming out of a comatose state. Zack dies, he's freaking out, and like he doesn't know
yeah,
the significant the significance of the weapon that he's handed.
yeah, it still makes sense that Cloud uses it. It's really just
Right,
Zack because Zack has that relationship. Yeah.
right. um but yeah, it's kind of used as a symbol, but it's not really a consistent one, and I guess that's kind of the issue I take there.
Hmm.
Let's finishing off the three. We talked about Genesis, we talked about Angeal. Let's talk about Sephiroth, how he's kind of presented in this game. Do you feel he's kind of humanized?
He has like a few lines of empathy,
Yeah.
especially when it's between him, Genesis, and Angeal.
Yeah, like he early on in the game, you're as or Zack is tasked with Sung to go to Benora and capture and bring back Angie or Angeal potentially, but mostly Genesis.
Hmm.
Benora being their hometown, and Sephiroth was originally going to go, but he refused. And like Sung even brings, I believe it's Sung that brings it up. Like, I understand now, they're his friends. He doesn't want to fight them. And
Yeah,
like the next mission you go with Sephiroth and he's still hesitant. Any moment prior to the Nibelheim incident, I feel does humanize him pretty significantly, and I think that's interesting because we don't get a lot of time in the original game seeing Sephiroth not being the Sephiroth we know, like hell bent
yeah.
on
Right.
taking revenge and destroying the planet.
I guess yeah. I guess if there's one bone I can throw to them for including the whole Genesis Angeal Sephiroth triangle, it's that it does humanize him, even if his behavior, and maybe it's just because the dialogue's so bad, but he does come off as significantly more alien than the other characters in his mannerisms and speech, which I think is fitting given you know what Sephiroth is.
Yeah.
Um,
Hey, we do get him laughing.
I was just gonna say
Yes.
that.
They stayed loyal to that, going to Nibelheim, and he's like talking about his parents. He's like, my father.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I was kind of surprised to see that,
Yeah.
if I'm being honest. But yeah, I think they took a pretty good approach with it. Like they didn't try to do anything out of the ordinary with Sephiroth in this game, and I appreciate that. You know,
Yeah.
they gave him a relationship with the new characters that they presented. Obviously, I feel like it would be stronger if Genesis was completely out of the picture, but they we got what we got. So
It was a gentle humanization, and like they made him empathetic, but not in like a way that overdid it, that made him not feel like Sephiroth. Like there was still this like mysteriousness and silence about him
Mhm.
that
yeah,
carries through to when he is in 7. And I appreciated that, because if I would have seen him been like too TLC, tender loving care, I would have been like, wait a minute, hold on. I get it, like you're trying to humanize him, but it's a little too much and doesn't feel like Sephiroth at all.
Yeah, and
yeah,
yeah, and it wouldn't be consistent, with the theme running throughout all of the Fantasy VII worlds, like the idealization of
Yeah.
people, these dreams that we aspire to, we really need to embrace ourselves. Yeah.
yeah. All right, let's talk about Aerith. Did you
She's
guys?
fucking.
Okay, go ahead.
Uh, uh, I really like the new voice actress, so that's why I kept it in English. But uh, Aerith, like, she kind of, I don't want to say abusive, but like Zach does all this shit for her, and he goes through so much, and yet like she's still kind of a dick to him. Not like a dick, but like she still wants him to do more. She's like,
I
"Oh, you
don't.
just did like 50 things for me. Like, do something else." And it
I
just comes across as a little bit like too needy for me.
okay.
And I love
Almost.
her in 7 remake, like
Yeah.
so much. So it's not like I don't like her character. I just don't like her character as much in Crisis Core.
Okay. I think it's a very playground relationship that they have, which like he's kind of Zach's like he's a very outgoing soldier, he's a very outgoing warrior, so it's maybe it's like a good um presentation of innocence almost. Aerith kind of pulls him into a world that he's not really familiar with, and like they kind of hint and jab at Zach being kind of a ladies man earlier in the game, but like
Right.
never a situation where he's like absolutely smitten with someone. And like I think they do kind of present, again, like it would be much stronger if some of the interactions we see between them weren't locked behind the DMW. But like it's interesting to see when they are together, when they are kind of presenting the fact that they have a relationship together and are maybe building towards something.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing where like their relationship almost seems like dumb young love that isn't really love. Like she's a young girl that has an idealized version of him. He's a soldier not familiar with this world that just sees her as this idealized pretty, girl in a church with flowers, which to be fair is in many ways what Cloud, obviously they had time to flesh out that relationship, but in the original game, Aerith was to Cloud the idealized girl, a foil to Tifa's the girl next door archetype, like amongst many other things, obviously. But I think even though like their relationship is kind of awkward and like you spend an entire chapter building a fucking cart for flowers that doesn't even
you
really
can
get
you can build 3 carts too.
Yeah.
yeah. Aside from the fact I wanted to shoot myself in the head during that chapter, um, I actually kind of liked the fact that the relationship, even if it wasn't meant to, felt awkward and not. They didn't see each other much. It didn't feel like a real relationship. It felt like
Well,
two kids kind of believing they were in a relationship, which I
I
think matches the original story, even if it wasn't intended to.
I mean, like Zach is presented in the original by Aerith as her first boyfriend, her
Right.
first love, and they're obviously young. So yeah, it is very much young love, right? Which how genuine is that? Is that typically in people their age? It's they're working with what they've got. Zach also has a very demanding job that pulls him away a lot, and we see that. That's kind of what prevents a lot of uh, the direct relationship growth that we from what we can see of them. Obviously, again, there's stuff you can see randomly from the DMW that helps with that perception of their relationship, but
I
you're
guess
kind of
that's
at the
my
mercy of that
problem.
being
Like, I
seen.
guess, yeah, I guess I'm salty because, like, you spend this whole chapter and plus side missions doing all this stuff to win her love, quote unquote.
With
Um,
Bruno, who
with,
steals your wallet.
yeah, amongst like all these like potions have the perfect perfume, whatever, all this
Yeah.
crap you do for her. And her DMW wound up being the lowest from everyone for the longest time. And I had to do so much uh, like keeping my controller on while in the middle of a fight just to get her
Yeah.
DMW up, and then I missed out on the scenes because it was random.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So
and to be fair, like that is much less like the game trying to tell you she's not important to him, and much more the DMW is just randomized crap. Like
yeah,
it's just a slot machine.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I enjoyed I enjoyed the presentation of their relationship here, and it makes it so much more tragic when at close to the end of the game
The letters.
the letters and you
Hmm.
realize like she wrote, what was it, 89 letters to him.
yeah, something
The
like
final
that.
one was in whose possession? Oh, I the
Song.
Angeal.
Wasn't it Song?
I no, it was
Sung had
the
the
Angeal
83.
the Angeal monster, the last one that was watching over her in the church that came to protect
Oh no, I'm sorry. I confused it. Song is like trying to get something to him at the
well,
end
Sung
before he dies.
has like the
Yes.
other 88
Yeah,
letters.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He was given a letter to give to Zach, but they didn't know where Zach was because he's locked away in the Shinra mansion in Nibelheim for 4 years.
Well,
And
that's
when he finds out he's been gone for 4 years,
right.
he flips the fuck out.
And it's weird because I could see somebody very easily missing that because he just reads like 4 years from the letter and
I
like
mean, he kind of shouts that
he
it's
he
been
does
4 years.
he does shout it, but I could see somebody not intimately familiar with everything, like
Yeah,
not picking up on that. Yeah.
yeah.
I think it was really cool when they showed her at the end and she looked like significantly older, like you can tell, and like she had like her iconic outfit on.
Yeah.
That's when it really hit me. I was like, damn, like she's grown now and she's been like having all this time not knowing what was going on with Zach. And then like it's raining and it was just, and you see the flowers and it was just really impactful. And it
Hmm.
adds a lot of meaning, this game, to the flower scene in the beginning, and throughout Final Fantasy VII.
I mean, yeah, it really helps to flesh out just why Aerith was so kind of taken aback by. I mean, like how coincidental that two guys in Soldier with the big ass Buster Sword
Hmm.
fall through her church roof onto her flower bed in the span of what, 5 years. Like it's what are the odds? But
Yeah.
she does. If I recall correctly, she does kind of. I mean, like the whole reason there's such a big debate about the love triangle between Cloud, Aerith, and Tifa is like people try to ship Aerith and Cloud. It's like, well, no, she doesn't. She's not in love with Cloud. She's in love with Zack, who a lot of his personality traits, a lot of him is she sees in Cloud. She's reminded of him, and this game really kind of proves that, shows that, because of how similar their circumstances are.
Well, seven does that too. At least seven remake, from what I remember, does that too, where she's like, you remind me of somebody.
No,
She
that
never,
well,
yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
yeah.
that's what I'm saying. But like, it's been such a long running debate on the shipping of characters with this game, and it's never made sense to me because it's pretty clear cut what the game is
Yeah.
trying to tell us.
She is the idealized girl archetype, and the reality is that Cloud doesn't love her either. He loves it's the girl next door versus the idealized, and it's not necessarily need to be a girl. Like, if you ever seen the movie While You Were Sleeping, Sandra Bullock has this idealized man and ends up falling in love with, you know, her brother, or his brother. I'm sorry, her brother. Jesus Christ.
I was
Those
like, what's
those would
happening?
be two
Yeah,
very
yeah.
different movies.
But his brother, who is like less successful and more down to earth guy, it's girl
Yeah.
slash guy next door versus the idealized love interest.
I mean,
Yeah,
look, I don't want to get into debates about like Final Fantasy VII character shipping. I don't know that I'd want to come
but it's not
outright and
even shipping.
say
That's just the story.
no.
It's
I know.
yeah.
I don't want to come out outright and just say that I don't want to outright say that Cloud never had feelings for Aerith of any certain of any sort.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Like you do anyone could make an argument that he definitely did, but that wasn't. She's not his main love, right?
Right, exactly.
And that like Tifa's presented in the way she is because that's their relationship. There's so
Right.
much that Cloud wouldn't do so many of the things he's done in his life if it weren't for Tifa. But
Tifa
again,
actually understands Cloud, and she actually like knows what's going on with him before
yeah.
even the audience does. Yeah,
And hey, like I didn't even put Tifa here in the notes, but she's in this game and she's visibly disappointed. She you get emails from her asking, "Hey, is there a blonde guy in Soldier by any chance?"
Yeah.
Like she's waiting for Cloud to come back. She wants to see him and he's there and she just doesn't know it.
right.
She's like,
Like
don't tell him that I asked, by the way. She sends another email
yeah.
like, wait, please don't tell him.
Forget I asked. Don't say
Yeah.
anything to him. And I even thought about it. I was like, well, wait a second. Like, I mean, I know obviously she's talking about Cloud. Everyone knows that, but like Lazard's blonde. He's the
Right, right.
director of Soldier. Is she trying to get
Well,
Lazard?
is he by the end of the game?
Yeah, well, maybe not so much, but all right, is there
One
anything
thing,
else we wanted to talk about with it? Oh, go ahead.
just one quick note about Tifa. They try to kind of give like a lead into her, eventually joining Avalanche with the whole. They give her dialogue like, "Why are you so mean to Shinra?" And like, I thought that could have been done way better. Like, honestly, that I can't remember exactly how it was phrased, but like, it instantly reminded me of the 1990s It movie where
Oh,
the one
the
character
Tim
goes,
Curry one.
"Why is it so mean? Why does it hate?" Like that's kind of how Tifa came off, and I was like,
All right, let's are we anything else with Aerith? I want to speed
No.
through some of the other
yeah."
characters to make some quick notes about them. I feel like there's not much to say about Sung.
I just have one thing to say. Was I found it hilarious how like the Turks are supposed to be this super elite group, and Zack and Aerith are hanging out in the park, and Song's just like hiding behind some like a
Yeah,
swing
and like
set. It's like he's
yeah.
supposed to be like the super elite head of the Turks, and he's spying, quote unquote, on Aerith
Well,
by
it's
just
also
standing 10 feet away.
it also is funny how like 'cause Zach confronts him about that, and like they kind of talk a little bit about the fact like who Aerith is and why he's kind of keeping an eye on her. But
Right.
like in Seven, he's much more aggressive about trying to take her in. In this game, he's not really aggressive about it, and kind of like almost supports Zach having a relationship with her, or at least he just kind of like lets it happen. At the end, like Sung and Cisne are actively trying to get Zack back, get him the letters, and have them reunite. Like it weirdly humanizes Sung, and it's kind of a weird humanization because it's completely undone in Seven.
Yeah,
I mean, like
it's
not undone in this just because Seven came before Crisis Core did, but like it just doesn't stay consistent by the time you get to the original game and who he is in that game.
yeah. To be fair, the Turks in general come off in the original game. They were a menacing arm of Shinra, and then in this game, they're at times kind of like just schlubby, like another guy. And to be fair, a lot of that has to do with the fact that for most of the game, you are working for Shinra,
Yeah.
unlike the original. So of course, you're going to have relationships with these people. It just kind of like there was that veneer of they were imposing, they were elite, they were menacing in the original.
Well, the original does show at times does show them as having some form of morals.
Sure, sure,
Um,
sure.
like close to the end of Seven, like you can engage in a fight with Reno, Rude, and Elena, or you could just tell them, "Nah, I don't want to fight you,"
Right.
and you don't have to fight them. Um, they're kind of presented as they're the employees that have the dirtiest jobs, and they're just doing them because
Mhm.
they have to. It's what they're told. But they are at times presented as having some sort of morals. But Sung especially was kind of always presented as ruthless.
Yes.
Um, And even in remake, when he goes to collect Aerith from the slums, he's not like um kind about it. He forces her to go with him.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it's a little. I feel like his character in this game, it's not the same Sung that we see, and I don't know if they're trying to play like Zack's death had some sort of significant impact on him, made him become more ruthless. Like maybe you could play that card, but he was also totally okay with bombing a village. So and even Zack kind of questioned that. Also, I love that his limit break is once again just bombing the enemies.
Right.
Just
Right.
calls it an airstrike. Um, let's talk about Cisne. I think Cisne had a lot of potential. Again, there's some great scenes that are shown in the DMW that you don't explicitly get to see. Very heavily implied to have a crush on Zack, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yes, for sure.
I
Which makes it
the
a shame because she could have, if you really wanted to set the parallels between Cloud and Zack, like Tifa stand-in right there.
Yeah, well, I think it's also she's like an interesting foil to Aerith in that how Zack is constantly walking away from his time with Aerith due to his job. Cisne has a pretty similar conflict of responsibility,
Right.
and when she confronts Zack when he's on the run, like she lets her emotions kind of get in the way of her doing her job, and kind of tries to help him. And obviously by the end, her and Sung try to save him, and they obviously fail. um so yeah, I think she was a great character with a lot of promise. Out of all the characters that are, she wasn't completely introduced in this game. She was a character in Before Crisis, but she was fleshed out much more in this game and actually kind of made more into a character in this game. Of all the characters from this game that could potentially be coming back and further remake projects, like she's probably the one I'm most interested to see them reintroduce and kind of do something with.
Oh yeah, for
um
sure.
it's kind of left vague like what she does after this game, because obviously she isn't in the original Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
She's another Turk that just isn't involved with your party's goings on, or maybe she quits being a Turk after what happens to Zack. Who's to
Yeah.
say? um
I want her to quit, but at the same time, like she said, she was like born into this job,
mhm,
So
yeah,
to break away from that would be like breaking away from her only family, probably.
yeah. And she has lots of regret surrounding Zack. Like I said, she obviously had a big crush on him. Cisne's not her real name, and her real name isn't. They were always referred to by like whatever their main weapon was in Before Crisis. Cisne was like a moniker given to her here, and then they decided, oh, that's not actually her real name.
Hmm.
So it's like she has a lot of regret for never telling Zack her real name, never getting that chance. Um, and I think she was probably one of the most compelling characters, and but it never quite reached the highs that it could have, the potential that it could have in this game, just due to how the
Yeah.
game is structured.
Right.
I feel like we touched on everything we kind of need to touch on with Hollander and Lazard. They both. Oh, there is one interesting thing I want to bring up about Lazard that I think was in an email. And that's that he's kind of a bastard child of President Shinra, uh,
Hmm.
which I thought was a really interesting bit of backstory. It's part, I guess, lends to his reason for wanting revenge against the company. He was just, kind of
That's right, because
disregarded by it.
it's kind of just mentioned in the aftermath, the explanation. Oh yeah, Lazard was funding them, by the way,
Yeah.
and he just like disappears from the game for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which again is it kind of lends more to why the story is a little messy. Like you just get these big reveals that are just like they're like supposed to be big and have like some sort of meaning behind like the implications of everything, but it's just kind of like, oh, all right, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lazard and Hollander wanted revenge on Shinra. I just wanted to bring up the love child of President Shinra tidbit about Lazard. I thought that was interesting. Yuffie's in this game. She's basically got no importance. She's
Yeah, I
just an
mean,
annoying child. She
in the main
Naruto runs.
yeah, in the main story, she shows up once, and then you can play. I played one of the side quests, the treasure hunt one,
Yeah.
where you find the treasure, and then she's like, "Oh, glory for Wu." She says, "I don't remember something about glory for Wu
and
Tai
and
getting
those
rich
are
free."
all
Yeah,
those are all basically the same too. Is like there's a couple materia hunter mission strings where she shows up, and they're all basically like she tries to trick you into getting to this chest and then take the treasure from you and fails.
to be fair, there's not much they really can do because Yuffie was an optional character in the original game, and
Yeah,
she
but
did have a
he's
lot. She did have a lot of like side content that was expanded the lore with Wu Tai and whatnot. But
yeah. Well, let's also consider Vincent was an optional character in the original, and he got an entire spin-off game just to himself.
true.
So
And I guess Yuffie did with kind of with that DLC, yeah.
right. So like those characters are ostensibly like they're very much important to the canon, even if you can technically skip them in the original game.
Yeah, because in the original game you have to like go to a specific area in the world map early on and run around until you randomly
Any
encounter her.
any forest on the first continent
Yeah.
until you run into her. Yeah, there's like a 20% chance of her attacking you or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are ostensibly important to the canon. It's just yeah, it was a decision to make them optional in the original, and I'm sure that's a decision that if Kitase and whomever else could take it back, they probably would at this rate.
Yeah, that's not really something that's something they stopped doing like cuz in the Super Nintendo days like half the party was optional
Yeah.
whereas like, that
Yeah, like
went
Final
away.
Fantasy VI, I think, had 3 optional characters or something
Yeah, there's a
similar.
lot of party members in that game and there's a
Yeah,
bunch of optional ones, yeah.
yeah. And then the last person I want to bring up is I don't even remember the other person who randomly starts emailing you, but Consul. I really thought that like I don't know if this game
Who is
if
he? Like I never
he
understood
was
really
the
who he
one
was.
soldier he was the one soldier pal that kind of he was kind of treated as like your tutorial agent at the beginning of the game,
Oh, okay.
but he's
Yeah.
also like kind of presented as like a buddy of Cloud or of Zack's, and he's constantly emailing him and talking to him, and he's kind of like a lore dropper, like he's constantly giving
Yeah.
you like lore tidbits and whatnot via
I,
email.
I know who it is you're talking about now, and throughout the game I actually thought that like Kunsel was gonna end up being some like some like pet nickname for Cloud. Like it would be revealed that Kunsel
Oh
was Cloud. Which actually kind
no.
of I don't know if that would have been I don't know if that really would work because the personality yeah, I don't know. But like you know what I mean? Like the
Well,
character
right
kind of
away,
appeared in there.
the fact that that he's in Soldier at the beginning of the game kind of negates that though, because Cloud
Yeah.
isn't in Soldier.
Yeah.
Um, but like I mean, frankly, I would have liked him to be more of a character, but they don't even give him anything more than a generic soldier model. Um, Considering he's a named character that is clearly, obviously close to Zack, it kind of bugs me that they didn't really do much with him in the end. But he did get name dropped in remake.
I don't remember
Um,
that.
it's toward the end when you're in the Shinra building. Um, like you run some Shinra employees or
Oh,
soldiers
I
recognize
remember.
Cloud, and they're like, "Hold on, I'll go get Consul."
Yes,
Like he's
I
named
Oh
remember
dropped.
wow.
you mentioned this, I think, in our discussion of the game,
Yeah,
yes.
and I kind of do wonder. Sorry, I guess that's a minor spoiler for remake, but I'm not bleeping that one. It's so minor, like you'll get over it if you haven't played that game.
It's a
Um,
tutorial character, yeah, don't worry about
yeah,
it.
like it's such a minor cameo slash reference and mention. It's one of those things where like if you have no idea what he's talking about, then it doesn't matter anyway, and if you do, it's just kind of like, oh okay, because it's like the only time that he's mentioned. But yeah, I kind of wish they would have done more. So is there anything else story related or character related you guys want to talk about before we move on to gameplay?
Nope.
And if anything else comes up, we'll probably just bring it up because that's how we roll and reap the spoils. Um, we already talked a little bit about combat, and some of the changes. Obviously, we talked about the Buster Sword stance. That's totally new to Reunion. I guess we'll talk about progression, and that'll kind of inform a little bit more about combat. But like, how did you guys like the materia system and materia fusion in this game?
It's overwhelming. It's like you can get a materia, and then as soon as you get that materia, you level it up. Then you get a better materia, like a plus version of whatever the materia is. And then you level that up, and then you get a plus plus. And it's like, it almost feels like all the work you put into leveling up the materia is for nothing, because you could either just fuse it to make it stronger eventually, or you'll get a stronger one. At
Yeah,
least if you were going for 100% like I was.
I basically got Curaga, I think Thundara or Thundaga, a fire sword attack, a blizzard sword attack, and that was like by halfway through the game. And by that point, I didn't mess with materia at all the rest of the game.
The problem with materia fusion is unless you have a chart or you look up how it all works online, like the game just doesn't really make much of an effort to explain the system to you.
That's the problem with a lot of these mechanics is that you have to really read all of these. There's so many goddamn tutorial emails,
Yeah, but
and
even
a
those,
lot of them don't even fully explain the mechanics.
right, and it's because like there's actually like a whole hidden ranking system behind all the materia, right? There's like
Yeah,
I think rank 1 through 8, and they all have different like there's all sorts of different types, and mixing certain types with other certain types will get you a very specific type, and the ranking system, how that kind of goes into it, will get you a certain rank. And then there's the stats that are attached to them, and min maxing to get a materia of like good worth, like a high ranking materia that has like maxed stats attached to it, is such a nightmare, especially when you're in the end. If you make a mistake, I had like several materia that had like near maxed out stats and stuff. Like I think I had a costly punch that was at HP plus like 870% or something. And I
it
wanted to get
goes
that
that
to,
high.
yeah, you can get HP up to 999%.
Well, I guess a lot of this like min maxing only really applies to the if you do the side quests, which like I said,
Right.
I
Yeah.
did two, and then I was like, I'm not doing this because you can even the hardest bosses in the main game you can beat under leveled.
Yeah. But and I will say just to double back a little bit to just general combat in Reunion is so much more fluid and intuitive than it was on the PSP version. And I know fresh with a fresh mind because I'm replaying the PSP version right now.
Oh
Jeez.
man.
I wanted to replay it before or play a little bit of it at least before we recorded this to get to so I could remind myself how it was then and how it is now. And man, guys, if you think this game plays bad, go play the PSP version. You'll think this game or Reunion is
Man,
amazing.
I had a PSP. I remember those days.
It's a little it's like not unintuitive. It's just instead of on this version or in Reunion, right? Most of the time when we're talking about this game, we're talking about Reunion because that's a version all three of us have played. That's a version a lot of people are going to be playing. Um, all the materia are mapped basically to shortcuts. You press the materia button, and then you press the button linked to that specific materia to use it. In the original, you are on attack and you have to use the bumpers to move to your other materia on
Oh,
your
fuck
like little
that.
menu.
So basically,
And
what items are in this game,
yeah,
kind of, yeah.
yes, there's no dedicated attack button in the PSP version.
Oh
It
god,
is what
Yuck.
that would have been
what you
even more infuriating than what it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
because like if you have to cure, you have to tap over to your cure and use that and then tap back to attack so you can start attacking again.
Oh hell no.
It's like like Kingdom Hearts has always been more intuitive than this. Um, I mean, it's kind of what they needed to do on the PSP, I guess, until Birth by Sleep came out and they managed to do the Kingdom Hearts formula on PSP. But uh, in a lot of ways, this game feels like a predecessor to Birth by Sleep, which I found really interesting as someone that also is a big Kingdom Hearts fan alongside being a Final Fantasy fan. But anyway, yeah, like I had several materia that had going back to the materia fusion. I had several materia that had near maxed out stats, but they were like ultimate level materia. They were the highest tier you could get. So I couldn't transfer those stats to any other materia
Right.
to keep it on that materia rather. Like I had a costly punch that had 870. I couldn't get it maxed out on costly punch without getting rid of my costly punch, and then I wouldn't be able to get another unless I just like I guess went through the whole process again. But I don't even think I could do that. Like it just sucks. You have to really plan out your min maxing ahead of time, and you typically with min maxing you do, but it's really frustrating when you almost get there and then you can't get all the way there. Just because
Mhm.
this system is just so confusing and almost borderline nonsensical.
And the mess up part about it is that for the end game content, meaning like the hard missions, like I would say like 8, 9, 10 level, like the one
Yeah.
with the 10 stars, and then Minerva, you have to have maxed out stats. Like it doesn't even like the materia matters, costly punch and whatever, but what matters more is the stats that you have attached to it. And you
Yes.
don't get those stats just by getting the materia. You have to actually pour like chocobo feathers or whatever materials into it to max it out, and you have to still fuse it with another materia in order to add that stat
Yeah.
to it. So it's unnecessarily convoluted. It's stupid to the point where the hardest boss in the game, which is supposed to be Minerva, is just she's a joke because you're just there making sure you have the mid max stats, and then you're just punching the shit out of her and using Karaga,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Yep.
And she's just a tank, you know.
Yep. And I mean there's she's not the only like Final Fantasy super boss or even Square Enix game super boss that is there's only like 1 to 2 effective strategies against it, and it's usually a bullshit strategy. Like in Minerva's case, it's you either use costly punch like 100 or so times, doing 99,999 damage to her with each hit until she's dead, or you raise a fuck ton of gil and then use gil toss over and over again to deal as much damage as you possibly can. Those are the only like truly effective strategies against her if you just like want to do it in the least frustrating way. Which I is kind of a problem in my opinion. I think that sucks. I think that's just
It
an
does.
unfun super boss. Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep is a similar problem, but instead of 2 strategies, there's basically 1, and it's even worse. But we don't need to talk about Kingdom Hearts. But yeah, materia fusion could have been cool. It could have been a neat idea if it wasn't just like so confusing and makes absolutely no effort to explain itself well or provide you with the resources in game to understand it. You really have to go out of your way to understand how it works and do research, and it's
And
this isn't the game to be doing that with, in my opinion.
yeah, and I feel like for casual play, like I guess it's good that I kind of just played it more casually, so I have like an opposite end experience. It's
Mhm.
also super easy to exploit, where like you can get powerful material like Thundaga. Like basically by the last third of the game, all I was doing was spamming Thundaga and Curaga, and because you can buy like the base items at any time. I mean, in addition, obviously, to limit breaks and finisher bonuses that replenish your stats,
Yeah,
you can just buy like infinite ethers
yeah,
and just keep refilling. You don't even have to engage in melee combat unless it's like a specific enemy that resists whatever spell you're using.
yeah.
That was literally how I beat all of the last bosses.
Just
Yeah.
Thundaga over and
Thundaga.
over again.
Well, specifically with when we'll talk about with the gameplay with the Sephiroth boss, because I didn't want to engage uh,
Oh yeah, right,
physically because of the mechanic. Yeah,
right.
but even the final boss, because the final boss, I was just doing like 6,000, 7,000 damage every time with Thundaga. Yeah,
Mhm,
because he's weak to all of the 3 primary elements.
yeah.
I will
Can
say though. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say what I did like about the combat is when you would get like that infinite MP or AP cost, or and the way the limit system worked, where like you can limit multiple times pretty often as long as you're like doing enough attack or whatever, or you have the DMW up. I thought that was pretty fun and satisfying. Like, oh shit, my MP it does cost nothing. Let me just spam like Thundaga or whatever. I actually like that mechanic a lot.
Yeah, and that I was just about to jump into the DMW. The whole reason the DMW is implemented was uh Tabata wanted to have something that kept gameplay from getting repetitive. ironic, I know, because of the missions and stuff. But he wanted something to keep gameplay from getting repetitive. He wanted to keep new things happening constantly through battle. So the DMW came into existence, where random things might happen. You might get endure, you might get no MP cost, you might get a limit break. Replaying the PSP version, I kind of forgot about this. We didn't have to deal with this playing Reunion, but it just kind of does its thing in the corner,
Mm-hmm.
and like it'll get a little bigger if you have the two people, if you have like Angeal and Angeal on the ends, like to signify like, hey, you might get a limit break or a DMW image or something. Something good might happen here. In the PSP version, it pauses the action, and the DMW takes up the whole screen, and you wait to
Oh
see if
my
you get the
god.
thing that you need. And if you do, great. If you don't, it just goes back to combat, and it stops everything so you can look at it. And another nice thing, another nice quality of life improvement that Reunion did was, in the PSP version, if you got a limit break or a
You couldn't
summon,
skip it.
well, I th- I think you can skip the summon animations. Yeah, you can't skip the limit breaks.
Jesus Christ.
And they also happen immediately.
Right.
So if you get whatever Angeal, or if you get Octo Slash or whatever limit break or summon, like they happen whether you want them to or not, or they happen
Wow.
immediately, versus here where they get banked and you can use them if you want to, when you want to.
Yeah, because sometimes it was strategic to wait to use it when like somebody was about to cast Ultima or something like that,
Right.
so that you could not die.
Yeah. Yep. So that was yeah, it's nice having that comparison point of playing the PSP version and seeing, oh, you know what? Reunion did a lot of good for this game.
Thank
Made it a
you.
lot more bearable.
Hmm.
um
Someone said this was their favorite Final Fantasy game. Some like I don't know person in the video game industry. I don't remember who, but I
it's a
was just like,
it's a weirdly it's like a more common sentiment than you'd think. And I don't understand it either, cuz it's like, is this the only one you've played? Like there's
right,
so many others that are better than this. And I did walk away from this game having a newfound appreciation for it, and I think that only happened because of the good things that Reunion brings to the table for it. The good
yeah,
quality of life improvements. The combat feels so much more intuitive, fluid, and fun than it did on the PSP version. Um, but like, yeah, this game is far from perfect, and it's only barely decent, or on the good side of the scale for me. But anyway, I want to continue complaining about the DMW system. Just because like the whole random nature of it just makes it so troublesome. The fact that leveling up is somewhat randomized and tied to this is what I
Right.
really have a problem with. Like there is a
uh-huh.
hidden experience of factor. There, like you are accumulating experience points. It's just they're hidden from you, and when the game finally decides to let you level up is when the DMW will be like, okay, fine, level up.
Right.
Yeah,
And I never liked that. It's part of why I quit playing Crisis Core in my youth, like around when it came out, because I was underleveled and I couldn't do anything about it. I
yeah,
had to let the whims of the game decide, hey, yeah, we'll throw you a level up. And I think that's such a crappy system
yeah.
for progression. Um, materia growth, like you could go so long without any of your materia leveling up, and you can't do anything about it.
Yep.
It's just all randomized.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was kind of confused because I was using materia over and over again and it wouldn't level up. Then I would kill an enemy with another materia, and the materia I was using most of the time finally leveled. I'm like, I don't get what's going on here because it
And
says the more you use it, but like,
yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't know.
it's all just tied to the DMW gracing you with doubles of like specific numbers, and those numbers correspond to the materia slot. And if you
Right.
get two ones when you have two face images, all right, whatever materia you have in the first slot, that's gonna level up. It's
Yeah,
just like it's
I,
so
I
silly.
wasn't even paying attention to the the slots in the corner as I was
Yeah.
playing most of the combat in this game. If something good popped up, then cool.
Yeah.
That was pretty much how I approached it.
Like definitely credit to Tabata. He definitely had a good idea in mind for mixing things up a little bit. I think they went a little too far with the random chance.
Right.
Definitely.
Little too many dice rolls. All
Random
right.
nothing in any game, please.
Well, we are talking about a series that's well known for random encounters, so
Yeah.
I don't
Oh
know if we can
God,
escape it that well.
it's another thing. Cut the combat encounters. I would say I wish that I knew going into it that hugging the ledges would
Yeah.
actually like
See, I knew that
have less
going
random
in.
encounter.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I
I
wish.
because I used to do that when I played it. When I would go into a mission and I knew the mission was like pretty well above like my level point. So I'd go into it and I would hug the walls and the ledges and stuff to make sure I didn't get random encounter or not. They're not even random encounters. It's like if you're in like the internal building like thing, like if you're gonna walk into a big square room, there's gonna be an encounter there because
Right.
Right.
there's enough space for you to fight things in that room. So
But
Well, it's
yeah, if you
interesting.
walked
Oh,
like
sorry.
in the middle, no, I was just gonna say if you walk like in the middle, you'll every two
yeah,
steps you will have a fight.
yeah,
Literally, you gotta have a fight. One step, you're in another one. It was really annoying.
yeah.
But go ahead. Sorry, Juice.
No, even it's interesting because the random nature of encounters. I was actually reading somebody posted on somebody actually went through the original and compared it. It was not just the Crisis Core; it was also like remake and stuff,
Yeah.
comparing how long it takes to complete one of these, more action or fully action oriented, combat battles versus the original. The average turn-based battle in the original was only like I think they said it was 4 or 5 turns. They were not very long, and in many cases, those battles resolved much quicker than the actual fully controlled combat scenarios in these games. I find that very interesting.
Well, it's a different style of combat. It's also
Yeah,
balanced differently,
exactly.
and
It's the
yeah.
number, the way they, yeah,
Plus, like, let's also consider in the original game, like there would be a loading sequence that would bring you into the fight
hmm
before, and depending on certain statistics and certain status effects, like your ATB bars might start at different positions.
yeah.
There's several factors at play comparing turn-based to action-based combat. But anyway, yeah, I just circling back and tying up the DMW system is like, yeah, I do wish there was some stuff that wasn't so tied to the random chance, and that's
Yeah.
that's kind of always been my biggest issue with this game, and why it's always baffled me why people say it's their favorite. Like, there's so many systems that are actively working against you,
Yeah.
and it's just they're not fun or that engaging to use or work with. um why do you like this?
Yeah. I mean, the music's cool, I guess, in the combat.
See, I honestly think this soundtrack is very weak, and it's
Yeah.
not
I'm not saying the soundtrack. I like just the combat music.
oh, the
Aside,
combat music is good. The
Yeah.
battle music is good.
aside from the reused seven pieces, I kind of wasn't digging this music.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the soundtrack for this game is, I would say, is fairly weak. um it was composed by Takeharu Ishimoto,
Mm.
who, what else did he do? I'm just checking live. He did work on Final Fantasy X soundtrack, which 10 has a really good soundtrack, and also worked a little bit on. Oh, this is just as a synthesizer programmer. He's also done some work on Kingdom Hearts, and Kingdom Hearts typically has good music. But his I guess his biggest claim to fame really is the compilation titles. So yeah, there you go. That's why he was kind of tagged for the soundtrack for this game. And
All right.
I do, like I said, I do feel it's a comparatively weak soundtrack. It's got some good themes, and the battle music is pretty rocking. But yeah,
Yeah.
feel like we've I think the last major thing we got to talk about is the missions. And what I was telling you guys to try and just to contextualize it a little bit is that this was at the end of the day, or is at the end of the day, a game that was designed for a portable system.
Right.
So all the 300 missions that are all kind of bite-sized and could be completed in just like a few minutes, like that's kind of why. Like
Yeah,
it was intended to be played in bursts. It's the same logic behind why Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker is designed the way it is.
yeah, it's supposed to be played on a train commute because, to my knowledge, that's how most people, commute in Japan.
Yes, it
Um,
is.
but yeah, that's why I don't criticize. That's why I didn't bring up the awful level design that's like start stop start stop. Like I understand why it's like that. You're supposed to be able to play in a few minute bursts and then save, even if it's in a story mission.
Yeah, and they just have like giant with the missions. They have like these giant maps that they just kind of gate off certain pathways to give some semblance of level design. It's not unheard of. Other games have done it before, but
Right.
like it is just it's it's a lot of missions. It's a lot of what feels like busy work.
Yeah.
And Delilah, you and I did all 300
Which is
ever
Yeah,
ever again.
never. I mean, at first it was refreshing to have the bite-sized stuff. I was like, oh, I don't know, it feels kind of good to like just complete a mission. It felt satisfying. But then after like, I don't know, like 30, I was like, all right, fuck this. And then I did all of them.
And
see,
then it gets even more frustrating when all the high level ones again boils down to the same strategy: have materia with maxed out stats, costly punch, just beat the shit out of things.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I knew that it would eventually get to that point where the side missions become like end game. You need to min max kind of content, which is why I didn't bother because I didn't
Completely.
particularly enjoy the combat in this game to begin with. So
Mm-hmm.
like as soon as I did two missions and I really understood kind of what these were, and that's why I asked you, is it story relevant? And you're like, no,
And this is
yeah,
one of the things that I will bring up about certain missions is that some of them you only unlock if you engage with certain NPCs out in like Midgar, and in the Shinra building and certain other places. And those are some of the best because they're actually telling some semblance of a story. There's this whole subplot with Wu Tai spies being present in Midgar, and they're actually NPCs you can speak with earlier in the game, and they are acting really suspicious. So like when this side quest comes up and you're tasked with finding these Midgar spy or these Wutai spies, like you already kind of have an idea of like where some of them might be, and each one that you capture and turn in unlocks a new mission, um a new mission for you to do because you're capturing these Wutai spies and you're interrogating them for information, and thus you unlock a mission to go and take out more Wutai soldiers or whatever. There's another one that's has like a really good subplot where it's a soldier third class who doesn't feel like he's cut out, and so he
Oh
wants
yeah.
he wants to shadow you while you do some of his missions. And it in the end, the guy that was yelling at him at the beginning kind of heavily implies that he was mentored by someone that told him to embrace his dreams and protect his older honor. And Zach's like, hold on a second, I think I know who your mentor was. And it's just like a cute little subplot, but that's only done like by doing some of these missions. Those are some of the best missions just because they're actively telling some sort of plot.
right.
And then he's
Even
in the Shinra briefing room doing squats endlessly.
yeah. He's
Oh
just,
God,
I gotta get to 1,000 squats. It's like, dude, we're on chapter 6. I'm surely you're done by now. um, and there was another subplot that was in one of the mission lines that was like somewhat interesting, but it's escaping my memory now. But like my point is like those are some of the best that the game had to offer, and I feel like there were it would have been better if there were more of them, or I wish there were more of them, just because they were actually telling a story. And there's like flavor text for each mission that you could read, but like it's not really, it's just like flavor text to get you on your way to do the thing and then get out, and it's nothing really that important.
right.
Um, So yeah, 300 missions is daunting and exhausting, and yeah, it's a
It's not
lot.
even like I like the game enough to like justify doing it. It got to a point where at first I was like into it. Like I said, it was bite sized and satisfying.
Yeah.
And then at that point, I had done so many that I was like, can I really stop now?
Mhm.
So
I see.
I
The
I
only,
was
yeah.
gonna say
sunk cost fallacy.
I
Yeah,
actually
exactly.
I actually am kind of really surprised that you went through and got the plat for this, Delilah, because
Yeah.
I just talking to you guys, I knew how much you did not like this mission structure, and
Look,
I
dude,
don't blame
Yeah.
you.
my playtime totaled out at about 10 hours, and by the last half, like not even third half of it, I was just begging for the game to end. So I can only
Yeah.
imagine you guys doing all of those missions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was rough. I've never felt so happy finishing something before, and I never uninstalled something so quickly.
Okay, is there anything else you guys want to talk about the story of the gameplay before we get on to the final question?
No.
I guess I should just mention that the combat here, it's another attempt, or it was one of the earlier attempts, I should say, to fuse kind of the command base with the action. But maybe it just has to do with I'm used to more polished FromSoft games and dodging, blocking
Well,
mechanics, and here it's
from
like I'm not
that
used to not having iframes. I'm not used to like enemies, their
there are some
character models.
iframes here though.
But
I don't
like
know.
you can get hit by enemies, not their actual character models, but you'll still get hit by a physical attack. It's weird. There's a lot of weird stuff, and it's unresponsive. It's just very wonky, and it doesn't feel good to play.
I
Es-
don't
Especially
but I,
because the commands don't slow down the combat. Like I hate to give it credit, but Final Fantasy VII Remake, that was a smart decision, and it's not
well,
done here.
okay. Well, hold on. Because first of all, I don't think it's fair to compare this to a FromSoft game because I don't think they're fundamentally the same type of
No, no,
action
no.
RPG.
I'm not trying to compare like the combat
Okay.
in itself. I'm just saying I'm saying maybe it's because I'm used to more modern action games where you have more defined, radius of attack for enemies, more defined. You have iframes. You have all this stuff is very
Well, you
rigid, and
have you
you
I mean, in my experience, I mean, I felt the iframes were plenty in this game. I mean, I don't think every game is necessarily going to treat iframes the same way, and the way that they were treated in this game, I don't think was a problem. I also think this game had more of an emphasis on blocking than it did dodging, and that might be just due to the new added Buster Sword stance. I know when playing the PSP version, I'm definitely dodging more than I'm blocking, but
right.
um
There's also just balancing issues. A lot of one hit KOs that are just
yeah,
random.
well that's a whole
You don't get a lot of time to respond. I'm trying to go really fast to come.
no, I know.
Um, but you don't get a lot of time to respond to enemy attacks. Like the text will pop up and you don't even. It's less than a second before the attack hits you.
Yeah, and that's a little that is a little bit different and a little bit changed from the PSP version. I think the PSP version actually does that a little better. It gives you a little more time to breathe and react appropriately. Probably because it's a more primitive type of game and it's dealing with a different type of
Yeah.
hardware.
Long
But
story
Yeah.
short, if you're gonna have the command system, slow it down, slow the action down while you're putting in
well,
commands. Yeah.
I guess I'm a little confused because I feel like you would have liked this combat better than remake because it's all shortcut based. You put a cure in your circle materia slot, and you hold down L1 and press circle, and boom, you're cured. You don't really have to engage with much more than two buttons. I guess I'm a little surprised that you don't like that more than how
I
remake.
don't like either of them.
Well, I
I'm
know
just
you don't
saying
like either of them, but
if I had to choose one.
okay,
Again, I
okay.
don't like it's not that I don't think that action games can have RPG elements. Obviously, I loved Elden Ring and other FromSoft games. It's just I don't believe specifically the turn-based command system of the Final Fantasy games and other JRPGs doesn't mesh well with action combat. And I
Man, you
hold firm to that.
this
Did you
makes
feel that
me
same way
I
about
think
Stranger of Paradise? I felt like you liked that combat, and it was kind of like,
I honestly barely remember Stranger of Paradise other than the
go
guy swearing all the time.
go listen to our
Maybe.
Stranger of Paradise episode.
I honestly don't remember. I'll always bring it up every time we do one of these modern Final Fantasy games. It's one of the reasons I'm excited for the upcoming one is that it's designed by the Devil May Cry guy.
Yeah.
I will
Delilah's just
say, huh?
no, you're just bringing up Stranger in Paradise because you wanted to bring a little bit of chaos to this episode.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
chaos and swearing. Yeah,
I was gonna say, like, just to Jason's point, real quick, there are some enemies where it was like clear to dodge, when to dodge, and there were some enemies where it wasn't. And
Yeah.
sometimes it didn't function, especially when I was fighting those damn giant, creepy looking tomberries. I was like, I need my tomberries to be small. When they're big, I freak the fuck out. And like they were taking up the entire screen, and every time I would go and dodge a kitchen knife, they would still like catch me, and sometimes they would have me stuck in between their bellies. So there was like a level of jank to the combat, but it depended on the enemies that you were fighting, I think.
For audio listeners, I just tried to lift up and show that I am in fact wearing a Tonberry shirt
Yes.
today. I did that especially because I knew we were talking about Crisis Core. Um, yeah, I mean, like, it's all fair, right? Like, I definitely think the combat's improved from the PSP version, but I also have that I have that historical experience, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And
And based on like using items in this game was a nightmare, especially if you were like trying to get to a potion, didn't have any MP, couldn't heal, and you were trying to like rapidly R2 while running around dodging stuff. Yeah,
and I don't know, I didn't think it was that bad, but it's like, trust me, it's even worse on the PSP version. Because you gotta that you gotta key over to items, and then you gotta key to the item that you want, all while doing everything you just said you're
Nope.
doing. Okay, anything else before the final question? Jason, you got anything? You good?
no. Do you want me to give the rating yet, or do you have more questions?
No, 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 no. We're gonna do the final question, and
Okay,
then you
final
give your
question.
rating.
Okay, okay.
All right, this is where I'm gonna give a telegraphed warning. We're about to do some more major spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Remake. So, if you haven't listened, or if you haven't played Remake, I'm gonna edit in the timestamp for you to come back into the episode, if you want to hear the rest of it. Otherwise, stop listening now. Okay, timestamp for you to go to is 2 hours, 26 minutes, and 41 seconds. Okay, we can effectively spoil do some spoilers for Remake. So the final question that I have is, you guys got any wild theories about how Zach's gonna play in going forward? I know Delilah hinted earlier about the Buster Sword and how
Yeah.
there seemingly is a continuity where Zach survives.
Right.
So how's that gonna work for Cloud? Is he just gonna be a wet noodle in that continuity? Like, how are they gonna split that? What do you guys think they're gonna do with Zach?
I mean, at this point, the only thing I can think of that makes sense without them completely revamping the story is like an alternate timeline or some
Yeah.
kind of time travel shit.
Well, I
Well,
think that's
wait,
I
you
think the
said you
alternate timeline is
yeah,
definitely what they're going for, but I'm
it's a
wondering.
sequel. Remake is a sequel.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
It's not a remake.
Meta contextually, it is the first entry in what is kind of a meta sequel to Final Fantasy VII. Yes.
I feel like a lot of people. I mean, it's not like explicitly stated, but I think that's kind of the consensus right now.
Yeah, I just don't know how they're gonna pull it off. They're gonna or are we gonna occasionally at certain points in the story do a parallel storyline with Zack? And what's he gonna be doing? So, and this is something that Jason, you might not know because you didn't play Intermission. They actually added an additional cutscene to see a little more of Zack, and it was him going to the church, and he was like pacing outside, like trying to figure out what to say when he sees Aerith again, and he bursts through the doors and he's like, "I'm back," and he finds she's not there. The flowers are starting to wilt, and it's kind of like a like a refugee camp for people that were affected by the platefall, sector 6 platefall,
Yeah.
or sector 7, sorry, sector 7.
Yeah, I was kind
um
of thinking.
yeah, my that was my bad. So just lends more questions like, well, where's Aerith at that time? And also, what are they, just in general, what are they going to do with him?
Yeah, I can't even theorize at this point because I feel like they're gonna just do more with other characters and not just him
Yeah.
because of the characters that came up in the Yuffie DLC, as well as the way I feel like they're trying to tie the ending of Crisis Core to the
Well,
remake.
And I
I
mean, you
think
can't forget about the amazing motorcycle man that was in all the
Roche.
advertising. Yeah, I don't even
Yeah.
remember his name.
Um, I think Weiss and Nero are less like, I think they're just trying to finally make good on some promises they made with Dirge of Cerberus and Crisis Core, and try to like expand their roles in this universe rather than like do something totally wild and wacky with them that would like break continuity or something. I think that they're going to be part of like our main cast's plot and actually be incorporated, because like Dirge of Cerberus establishes that there was this whole other unit of Shinra people that like were just kept hidden and kind of contained because they're just that dangerous and were going to be used in certain situations. um and that's where Weiss and Nero come in, and by extension Genesis. So like I don't know that that's going to be like part of Zach's alternate timeline kind of deal. I think that might be incorporated into the main one, but I just do wonder where they're gonna go with this separate alternate thing where Zach lives. It's
Yeah, and are they gonna have like two Buster Swords?
yeah, well, like that's the question, right? Like in assuming that this is an alternate reality, assuming this is an alternate dimension, which we've already established that the remake the this remake dimension is an alternate dimension, because the whole all of remake story was predicated on them breaking the fate that they're destined to live out, and they break those chains and they're free to do what they want, and whether or not that's follow the story that they're destined to do or forge their own path is up to them. But like that's true of Zack, and what can only make sense in an alternate dimension, because if in the one that the remake cast is in, if he's still alive, like Cloud wouldn't have the Buster Sword.
We all know the entire series, the entire remake series, is going to end with Cloud and Zack either together or in some weird like He-Man. I don't know. Is He-Man the one that combines two people into one? I don't know. Zack and Cloud will morph into
That
one figure to fight Sephiroth in the
I
crater.
think I
Like
think that's
Numura's wet dream will come to life in the final battle.
I'm
I
pretty
don't.
sure you're thinking of Captain Planet there.
Captain Planet. I don't know. Whichever one of them. I don't know. You guys know my opinion on the remake. After the first one, don't
I
know, don't
know.
care. I will
Well,
play it for the podcast and, at the cost of my sanity, but
hey, you played this for the podcast at the cost of your
I did.
sanity, so
Yes.
That's how much I
um
love you guys. Yeah,
Ah.
oh. To be fair, this episode wasn't only me. Delilah also said that she would be totally down to do an episode on Crisis
and I
Core.
bet she's regretting that
I
now.
I refuse to take full responsibility for
Well,
this.
see, that's the thing. I actually thought that this would actually change things a little bit. Like,
Yeah,
at
no.
least have like an ending cutscene to
Well,
like
I
hint
did
in what
too.
direction they were going to like tie it all together. Because then I'm just like, well, then what was the point? Because
Well,
it's
The money.
no, 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 no,
right.
no. I don't want to go ahead and say that was. I mean, yeah, obviously they're a business; they have to make money. Of course, that's a big part of it. But like, clearly from what we saw in remake, clearly from the fact that Zack is alive in some alternate reality, right? Like, they kind of need to, if he's gonna be a big part of Rebirth, which it seems like he's gonna be a big part of Rebirth, they kind of have to explain to new fans and give, like I said, Crisis Core was on PSP jail. If there's any new fans coming into 7 with remake, they have no way of playing Crisis Core and knowing Zack's backstory and what his fate was supposed to be, unless they get a PSP and that game.
I totally get that. But then coming from the perspective of a lot of Crisis Core is understood through playing Final Fantasy VII,
Mm-hmm.
the original.
Yeah.
Then it's like if people play the remake and then went into this, I imagine that it's even more confusing.
Well,
Oh, I agree.
to be
I
fair,
agree. But
to understand remake, you have to have played the Final Fantasy VII original.
yeah, Delilah,
Right.
I completely agree with you, and that problem comes down to the staff behind remake uh claiming that you don't need prior knowledge to enjoy remake, which I guess, yeah, you can enjoy remake without knowing, but that ending's going to be so fucking confusing,
Right.
and you're just going to not understand the significance of what's going on unless you've played the original. But like I said, like we know that, but they're pushing for people to just play it because, I mean, yeah, they want the sales, but also like they just want new fans to come in and enjoy it and not feel like they're being gatekept. And I get
Yeah.
there's some merit behind that, but yeah, I too, to just go back to your original point, I also expected there to be like some bonus cutscene as part of this to maybe tie it in and make it a little more clear why they were releasing this now. Because to you and me and Jason, it's pretty obvious why they're releasing it now. Like I just said, they want people to know who Zack is and why he's significant to the story, and how he's and have that backstory before going into Rebirth, where he'll, obvious to me, play a big part. But
That just could be a factor of maybe they don't have part two's Zach's part in part two finalized yet. We don't know.
I mean, the game's coming out supposedly at the end of this year. They absolutely have that ready to go.
A lot of games stories develop as they're making the game.
Not this late in development. Not this late in develop. Not for modern games, Jason. When you consider there's voice work, when you consider there's motion capture, there's so much more work that, like, if it was a game made in
I
the,
guess that's fair, but
yeah, when it's a game made in like the 90s, like, yes, you can get away with
yeah,
making
because
story changes
I was
this
gonna
late.
point out that not even Katase knew the cloud twist until like
Yeah,
way into
one
the game's development. Yeah, that
100% the
yeah.
scenario is finalized for Rebirth. They know what they're doing at this rate. Otherwise, that game is not coming out this year, and they have to say that sooner rather than later.
Well,
Yeah, I know. But anyway, okay. If you're coming back from skipping ahead, we're no longer talking about remake. We are spoiler free from here on out, and we're going to be wrapping up the show. Jason, what is the Kwasnicki rating?
4.5 out of 10.
Actually, I'm surprised it's that
I
high.
thought you were gonna say like 3.
It really,
Yeah, I kind of did too.
yeah. I mean, I was gonna give it a mercy and just give it a 5, but I cannot call this game average. It is a below average game. It is grating to play. The story is awful, with the exception of some golden nuggets, most of which are just pulled from the original. So,
Uh-huh. Okay. Again, I can't fully argue with you there. Okay. Delilah, what are you doing? What are you up to? You got any plugs?
I have a job now, so I stream once a week on Twitch, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern.
All
So
right.
if you were ever watching me, now everything's different. And I still do YouTube stuff. I just released like my top 10 game of the year, most anticipated. So
Nice.
stuff is
Uh,
still happening, and it makes me tired now.
yeah, I feel that. Jason, you doing anything? You got anything you want to share?
no.
Okay.
That
Thank you.
doesn't really work because we're not doing video. If people are listening to this,
That,
which most people do as a
yeah.
podcast, they can't see me lean into the mic. So everybody who's
Yeah.
Chloe.
listening, that's what I was doing.
Yeah, thank you for your very dramatic audio pause. That's great. Great dead air. Love this show.
Yeah, you can edit that out.
Oh no, I'll leave it in. I'm leaving it in so that you have a reminder of what you did. I got nothing to plug, but you can follow me on Twitter at Nibblehymie, and you can follow Delilah on Twitter at Assassina_San. You can follow Jason on Twitter at SolidQuads, but don't follow him because he doesn't remember he has Twitter. Who knows? I'm amazed Twitter is still as functional as it is today, but it is slowly breaking down, and we'll see how that story develops. If you like the show, if you like Reap the Spoils, if you liked this episode, please, if you're listening on YouTube, thank you. Leave us a like, leave us a comment, tell us what you liked, tell us what you didn't like about this game, about this episode. And please share the show, subscribe to the channel, hit that subscribe button, share the show with your friends, your family, and your pets and your kids. Maybe not your kids, I don't know, we say bad words a lot. If you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, thank you so much. Please rate and review the show. 5 stars preferred. Leave us a review. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you didn't like. And if you listen on Spotify, leave us a rating. I don't remember. I still haven't looked into whether or not Spotify has like a more thorough reviewing like thing, or if it's just ratings. But leave us feedback. Like whatever, however you listen to us, leave us feedback. It really helps us grow. It helps us get better at doing this, and we really appreciate it. We love engaging with people. More and more people have been talking to us, and engaging with us. Actually, Delilah, who was that? Who was the guy that sent you that reached out to you? Just his first name? I think it
Oh
was Liam,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
right. Yep,
Shout
Liam.
out to Liam. Sent us a lovely email. Really, really made my day when Delilah
Yeah.
shared that with us. Thank you so much. If you're listening to this episode, if you're not, then I'll thank you again at
You
some
know what,
point.
Liam? I'm gonna pretend, and maybe you are, that you're Liam Neeson and you listen to our show. Thank you, Liam
Next,
Neeson.
next spoiler cast is on the movie Taken. No, I'm just kidding. I don't want to talk about Taken or its 15 sequels and television show. There was a television show too, wasn't there? For Taken?
No, not to my knowledge.
I'm positive that there was. Hold
I've
up.
never actually watched any of the
I'm
movies, so I
I
don't
am
know.
gonna hold up ending this show just so I can find out if there was indeed a television show based on the movie Taken. I'm like fairly certain there was. Taken franchise. Yes, there was a prequel television series. Absolutely baffling.
Wow.
Cannot believe it. Okay. So yeah, that's the show. Hey, Delilah, what's the next game we're talking about?
Metal Gear Solid 3, let's go.
Dun dun
Yeah.
dun dun. The greatest song in all of video gaming.
That it is a pretty fucking good song, I gotta say.
There are some
Uh,
great covers of that
I'm
song on
so
Spotify.
excited.
oh yeah. We're talking about Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater or Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, I guess, if you have like the Subsistence version.
Mm.
I don't think that adds any like story stuff, so I think
No,
like
but it
realistically,
plays very differently.
see, I'm kind of thinking about trying to play the original release in with its fixed camera angles and
I
everything,
think
just to
you
see
want
if I can.
to,
I
but
know I've tried before, and trust me, I there's a reason I haven't
I
beaten
mean,
it that way.
all of us here played the original when it came out, so I think so.
I didn't play it when it came out,
Oh, you
but
did?
I've tried to play the original iteration with the fixed camera angles, and I've not beaten that version. I've beaten the Subsistence version many times, but never the original with the fixed camera.
I mean, I'm being hyperbolic. Obviously, like having come from the games having fixed cameras, it wasn't a huge issue to me, but a lot of people didn't like it at the time.
I mean, I Metal Gear Solid 2 is one of my favorite games of all time, and it has
Yeah,
that style of
exactly.
camera.
My point exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's rough playing the original version of Snake Eater. It's just because the design changes. So we don't need to talk about this now. We'll talk
Yeah,
about
we're,
this
we're
in the
getting
next
into our
episode.
next episode already. But to be fair, one of my favorite games of all time, I
Yeah,
imagine you guys as well.
very
Yeah.
very excited to revisit Metal Gear Solid 3. It's a phenomenal video game, and I hope you tune in to listen. I hope you play it, so you got that fresh perspective. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next month. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.
Thanks for stopping by.
Combat result, or no, sorry, shit. Conflict resolved. We didn't bring up that at all.
Oh god. I was trying to suppress it.
I should have, when we started talking about this game, I should have said
Oh,
activating combat mode.
yeah. Oh my
Activating
god.
combat mode. You could just edit it.
Honestly,
Okay.
I was trying to just blast through the gameplay, like all my gripes with it as fast as possible, because I knew that you wanted to wrap it up.
Yeah. All right. Conflict resolved. Goodbye, everyone.